Chapter 693. Looking at the masters kneeling in front of him, it was impossible for Leng Shiqi to be calm. But he didn't become arrogant and tried to control his emotions. Please get up. We are all on the same side. You don't have to be so polite in the future. An old man standing at the front cupped his hands and said, "This humble one is Renyi. We congratulate Chief Steward Liu on his appointment. We finally have a pillar of support." 2 days ago, the headquarters of Dark Thunder Guards purged the forces of the Li family. Including Li Zhuge and the fourth uncle of the Li family, a total of 6 deputy directors and more than 20 eunuchs were killed. The people who could still stand here were somewhat special. They were either people who had been hidden away by Li Zhucheng, or some old guys who didn't have many days left, or people who had just entered the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards and hadn't completely submitted to Li Zhucheng. For example, the 3 deputy directors in front of Leng Shiqi were all gray-haired old men. Their qi and blood began to decline, and their combat effectiveness was getting worse and worse. There were also several old men among the 14 eunuchs. Basically, these people could only deal with things. Leng Shiqi couldn't help but feel a little headache. It seemed that he didn't have many real top fighting forces in his hands. In addition to these old men, there were only 8 masters in the realm of oneness of heaven and men. Because 2 of the eunuchs were in the realm of Gang Spirit, who had just entered the headquarters of Dark Thunder Guards and had good potential. Most of the 8 masters in the realm of oneness of heaven and men were in the early stage of oneness of heaven and men, and only 2 of them were in the middle stage. In fact, this kind of strength was very strong in any place in the world. But compared with the other 3 directors, it was too weak. The strength in one's hands determined the right to speak in Dark Thunder Guards. At present, Leng Shiqi was only a little stronger than the deputy directors, but he was still too weak in front of Eunuch Gao and others. Therefore, Leng Shiqi had 2 priorities. One was to accumulate great merits and cultivate a team as soon as possible, and completely gain a foothold in Dark Thunder Guards. The other was to improve his cultivation and strength. Only when he became stronger could he be truly powerful. Leng Shiqi said to Ren Yi and the others, "I will be setting off for Pinghui County tomorrow. I will need 2 Oneness of Heaven realm experts to accompany me. I wonder who is willing to go." At that moment, other than the few old men who had lost their vigor, the other 8 Unity of Heaven realm cultivators all stood out. "Your humble servant is willing to go." They all knew that the Eastern Suppression Thunderflame Army and the Imperial Family's Hall of Worship were the main forces in the destruction of the 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect. The Dark Lightning Guards were, at most, responsible for providing intelligence and sealing off information. It could be said that they were there to gain merits and experience. Of course, anyone would want to go there. Leng Shiqi had expected this. He said, "I don't know much about you, but time is tight. How about this, the 2 with the highest cultivation will follow me. Subordinate Yan Ming, accept the order. Subordinate Deng Xinlei accepts the order." The 2 of them were overjoyed and immediately bowed to receive their orders. As for the others, they couldn't say anything. Cultivation was their biggest advantage, and they couldn't blame others for their cultivation being inferior to theirs. On the surface, Yan Ming didn't look old and was quite handsome. However, he had a full beard, which made him look somewhat melancholic. As for Deng Xinlei, he looked like a carefree person. Leng Shiqi turned his head and ordered, "During this period of time when I'm not at the headquarters, Deputy Chief Renyi will be in charge of managing everything in the Xingji Pavilion." "Rest assured, my lord. Your humble servant will definitely manage the Xingji Pavilion well." Renyi knew that his strength was deteriorating, but he was still very confident in managing things. Leng Shiqi nodded and dismissed everyone, telling them to do what they needed to do. In fact, it was extremely disadvantageous for him to be away from the imperial capital right after he was promoted to Chief Ren. This was equivalent to losing the best opportunity to cultivate his trusted subordinates. However, he had already accepted the mission to destroy the 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect. Moreover, he really did want to make a trip to the 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect and take back the authority to supervise Pinghui County. Thus, this trip was unavoidable. Fortunately, Even if he left, the Xingji Pavilion still had a group of people he brought over. Above him, there was also eunuch Gao at the headquarters to help him take care of things, so there shouldn't be any problems. After dealing with all this, Lin Shiqi locked himself in the secret chamber. After becoming one of the 4 great chiefs, he realized that his cultivation was far from matching his current status. It was imperative that he improve his strength. Then, with a thought, he was teleported into the underworld and took out a mustard seed bracelet. This was Li Jueqing's mustard seed bracelet. Previously, he was afraid that there was a restriction in this mustard seed bracelet, so he didn't dare to open it. Now that he was in the underworld, he wasn't afraid even if there was a restriction. Lin Shiqi's mental power probed inside. As expected, it was blocked by a layer of power. He snorted coldly, and the sword of primordial spirit appeared and directly broke the restriction. However, the contents of the mustard seed bracelet immediately made Lin Shiqi lose his mind. It wasn't that he had never seen a huge amount of resources. When he found the Star Clan's secret treasure in Ningyang County, he also saw resources that were enough to shock the world. However, the resources in Li Jueqing's mustard seed bracelet could no longer be described as huge. It could be described as a moving treasure trove. The Star Clan's secret treasure trove only contained ores and materials. However, this mustard seed bracelet contained all kinds of resources. As long as one could think of it, it had it all. They were even piled up into small mountains. Spiritual stones, elixirs, spiritual weapons, heavenly materials and earthly treasures, formations, mystical items, and even cultivation methods and spiritual skills were all piled up in piles. Lin Shiqi was dazzled and overwhelmed. These resources were enough to support a top sect. It was obvious how much resources Li Jueqing had gathered over the years. After a long while, Lin Shiqi came back to his senses. Now that these resources were all his, he could confidently say that he didn't have to worry about resources anymore. Lin Shiqi collected his thoughts and first looked at the various cultivation methods and spiritual skills inside. Most of them were level 5 cultivation methods and above. There were even a few level 7 cultivation methods. There was even a level 8 cultivation method. Lin Shiqi's face lit up with joy. He took it out and wrote the words 16 Days Transformation Method on it. Seeing these words, Lin Shiqi's expression changed. He had heard of this cultivation method before. This was the cultivation method that the Li family's patriarch had created back then. The Li family's patriarch did not have a teacher. After joining the Dark Thunder Guards, he cultivated many cultivation methods. Later, he took a different path and created an extremely profound cultivation method, which was the 16 Days Transformation Method. The 16 Days Transformation Method was both a cultivation method and a spiritual skill. It was all-encompassing. The Li family's patriarch had combined all kinds of spiritual skills into one extremely powerful move. They were fist, palm, finger, leg, saber, sword, staff, spear, halberd, axe, earth, water, wind, fire, defense, and demon. Moreover, each of these spiritual skills was a rank 7 spiritual skill. Among them, Lin Shiqi had seen the mountain suppression, blade array, calling the wind, turning the cloud, and demon transformation. The Li family's patriarch's method was somewhat similar to Lin Shiqi's. However, Lin Shiqi relied on the system while the Li family's patriarch did not. From this, it could be seen that the Li family's patriarch was indeed an extremely talented person. Unfortunately, the Li family's descendants were not much. Even though there were a few experts, even Li Jueqing had only cultivated a few spiritual skills from the 16 Days Transformation Method. In Lin Shiqi's hands, this cultivation method was actually used to its fullest potential. He simply used his unlimited skill points to cultivate all 16 spiritual skills to great perfection. Mastering 16 rank 7 spiritual skills caused Lin Shiqi's strength to soar. It also increased his chances of participating in the destruction of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect and seizing Pinghui County. Chapter 694. In order to increase his confidence, Lin Shiqi took out a pile of things and placed them in front of him. There were more than 300 black grasses, 2 Tiangang pills, a blood-colored insect that was as thin as a hair, and the yin-yang spirit-gathering formation. He was going to break through to the 7th level of Gang Spirit Realm before going to Pinghui Prefecture. After he cultivated the rank 8 cultivation method, 16 days transformation's true solution, his cultivation had also increased by a portion. He was prepared to refine the remaining 300 plus black grass and swallow the Heavenly Dipper pill to make a breakthrough. To ensure that nothing went wrong, he even took out a strange object called the Fiend Blood Thread Worm. It was found in Li Juecheng's mustard seed bracelet. It was something for Gang Spirit Realm cultivators to quickly break through their cultivation. However, this evil Gang Blood nematode also had a huge drawback, that was, it would affect the mind of the refiner. If one was not careful, one would be bitten by the evil spirit and suffer from Qigong deviation. Therefore, few people would use such an extreme method, unless they were forced to. Of course, this didn't matter to Ling Shiqi. He had too many things on him that could suppress baleful aura. Besides, his evil spirit was horrible, so it was impossible for him to be bitten by the evil spirit of a small insect. After preparing all this, Ling Shiqi waved his hand, and a total of 1,000 mid-grade spiritual stones were embedded in the yin-yang gathering formation. Suddenly, the special spiritual power of the underworld swarmed in. Finally, he swallowed 2 Tiangang pills and the evil blood thread worm at the same time. The spiritual power in his body was surging, but it was all led into the star sea and turned into his cultivation. In the process, he constantly used the black mark to absorb the power of the mysterious grass. His spiritual power cultivation was growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. About 12 hours later, Ling Shiqi's body flashed with various colors of Gang spirit. The spiritual power within a few miles was constantly stirred, and his spiritual power suddenly soared. The 7th level of Gang Spirit Realm. Ling Shiqi exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and a smile appeared on his face. The breakthrough was very smooth. Although there was only one level between the 6th level and the 7th level of Gang Spirit Realm, the gap between them was very big. The biggest difference was the thickness of Gang Spirit. He used his fingers as a sword, and an illusory spirit sword energy that was more than 100 meters long shot out. Even he was shocked by it. In his impression, even Yen Mu, who was at level 9 of Gang Spirit Realm in the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, could only reach this level with a level 7 spiritual sword. This was the most direct benefit of having a deep spiritual energy foundation. Although he had just broken through to the 7th level of Gang Spirit Realm, the thickness of his Gang Spirit was stronger than that of the 9th level of Gang Spirit Realm. Kid, how is it that your strength can always improve so easily? Nine Leaves' voice suddenly rang out. This also made Ling Shiqi's heart skip a beat. When he entered the underworld, he had inadvertently brought Nine Leaf with him. How was he going to explain this to Nine Leaf? As expected, Nine Leaf immediately asked, where is this place? Ling Shiqi was going to give a perfunctory answer, but he suddenly remembered that there were 3 conditions for the underworld to level up again. They were to recruit 3 members of the underworld, collect 2 high-level souls, and have 40,000 system coins. When he was in the Void Scar Sky, he had already taken Yushu and Meng Ming into the underworld. Not long ago, he killed Li Juecheng and collected a high-level soul. If he pulled Nine Leaf into the underworld, he would meet most of the conditions for leveling up. Originally, he was going to invite Wu Diao or Di Chuan, but now he thought that Nine Leaf might be a better choice. First of all, he and Nine Leaf had signed an equal blood contract. They could not harm each other, so there was some guarantee. Moreover, he and Nine Leaf had always gotten along in the form of a deal. Although they did not completely trust each other, they still had at least credibility. He immediately said, to tell you the truth, this is a small secret realm that I obtained by chance. I used this secret realm as the foundation to create a force called the underworld. I would like to invite Senior Nine Leaf to join the underworld. You actually obtained a secret realm. Your luck is really enviable. Nine Leaf said in surprise, as for whether I join your force or not, I don't care. As long as the benefits are there, everything is negotiable. Hearing this condition, Lin Shiqi smiled inwardly. If there was one thing that he did not lack now, it would be resources. Without another word, he took out a small portion of high-level materials that were suitable for 9 leave from his mustard seed bracelet, including several rank 6 Yao cores. 9 leave immediately agreed with a smile. Lin Shiqi took 9 leave into the underworld through the territory system and said, Senior 9 leave, the underworld also has a mysterious power. All members of the underworld will receive a legacy power. Senior, you should show your true body and see what kind of legacy you can obtain. Oh. There's such a good thing. 9 Leaves' soul came out and returned to her true body. However, she did not take the legacy that Lin Shiqi mentioned too seriously. After all, 9 Leaves' true body was a precious Yao beast with inherited memories. Human legacies were not of much use to her. After 9 Leaves' true body appeared, Lin Shiqi raised his head and looked in the direction of Fengdu City. After a few breaths, purple Yao Qi surged towards him. 9 Leave was also shocked by this movement. She subconsciously wanted to dodge, but Lin Shiqi immediately shouted, Senior, don't move. 9 Leave hesitated for a moment but still chose to believe in Lin Shiqi. Immediately after, Yao Qi shrouded 9 Leave, and at the same time, that familiar voice sounded again. Title, Ghost Emperor Yao Yi of the Northern Wasteland. Ghost Emperor. Lin Shiqi looked at 9 Leave who was wrapped in Yao Qi. She received the title of Ghost Emperor of the 5 Directions on the same level as Delta Origi. However, this Ghost Emperor Yao Yi of the Northern Wasteland was not the only one in his memory. After the inheritance of Delta Origi and 9 Leave, Lin Shiqi guessed that the underworld would give different titles according to a person's potential and characteristics. It could also be said that the underworld would give the most suitable title for you. While 9 Leave was receiving the inheritance, Lin Shiqi directly went to find Li Jueqing's soul and turned Li Jueqing into his own ghost slave. When this ghost slave was formed, he had the strength of the late stage of Gang's spirit realm. It seemed that the strength of a ghost slave was indeed closely related to his previous cultivation. If Li Zhangtao and Li Juning were counted, his current 3 ghost slaves were all masters of the unity of heaven and men realm of the Li family. The Li family had been trying to kill Lin Shiqi. Now he was not dead, but the Li family was destroyed first. Even the strongest members of the Li family had become his ghost slave. It had to be said that this was a great irony. Then Lin Shiqi looked at the requirements for upgrading the underworld, the current level of the territory of the underworld, Stage 3. The requirements for upgrading the territory of the underworld, 1. Recruit 3 members of the underworld, March 3rd. 2. Collect 2 high-level souls, 12 thirds. 3. 40,000 system coins. He murmured, now there is only 1 high-level soul left to upgrade. Let's do this in Pinghui Prefecture. Chapter 695. The next morning, Lin Shiqi took Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei, 2 masters of oneness of heaven and men, to the interfield transmission formation of the imperial capital. When they came in, a large number of people knelt down. Greetings, Supervisor Lu. The news of Lin Shiqi becoming the new chief steward of the 4 great generals spread throughout the entire imperial city in a single night. Everyone who heard this news almost dropped their jaws in shock. No one dared to believe it, and many people even doubted the authenticity of the news. It was not until the Imperial Palace and the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards issued the appointment at the same time that people had to believe it. His Majesty really chose a junior of Gang's spirit realm to be the 4 supervisors. For a time, Lin Shiqi became the center of discussion in the imperial capital. Some slandered him, some envied him, and many people were guessing what Lei Qingjuan's intention was. But no matter how others looked down on him and thought that he was not worthy of the position, he was now the 4 supervisors of the Dark Thunder Guards, and he had the power to kill countless people. Anyone who saw him had to kneel down and salute him even if they were unwilling. Lin Shiqi waved his hand casually and said, "Get up." However, they did not directly transmit to Pinghui Prefecture, but stopped here to wait for a person. Soon, a man in shabby clothes, with messy hair and white beard, who looked like he had not bathed for several months, came in. He looked around and reached out to rub the dust off his body. When he saw Ling Shiqi, he immediately walked over. You are Lu Xingji, right? Just call me old man. Let's go to Pinghui Prefecture. Ling Shiqi looked at the man suspiciously. Was this old man the master of Imperial Hall of Worship who went to Pinghui Prefecture with him to destroy the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, an expert of Tianyuan realm? This was not the same as those high and mighty experts of Tianyuan realm he had seen before. But now there were not many people who dared to call him by his name, and others did not know that he was going to Pinghui Prefecture. So from this point of view, this old man might really be an expert of Tianyuan realm. To be on the safe side, Ling Shiqi walked over and cupped his hands. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly didn't know how to address the other party. Did she really call him old man? He simply said, Senior, you must be an expert from the Imperial Hall of Worship. There's no need to call me senior. Just call me old man. I don't dare to call myself an expert. Killing an old fart like the Thousand Illusion Sword Master is not a problem. Ling Shiqi's eyes twitched. The Thousand Illusions Sword Master was the great elder of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, the only Sky Origin stage cultivator. Good heavens! A Sky Origin stage cultivator has become an old bastard in the old man's mouth. Kill him as he pleases. Were all the experts of the Imperial family's Hall of Worship this arrogant? However, this also confirmed that this person was indeed an expert who had participated in the destruction of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. Ling Shiqi did not dare to be negligent. He also remembered that Eunuch Gao had said that this person had some relationship with him, but he did not know what that relationship was. Don't be long-winded. Let's hurry to Pinghui Prefecture. The old man pulled Ling Shiqi into the interdomain transfer formation. He seemed to be quite amiable. Ling Shiqi suppressed his doubts and said to the person in charge of activating the transfer formation, begin the transfer. Yes. Immediately, the transfer formation rotated and Ling Shiqi and the other three figures gradually disappeared. In an instant, they arrived at Pinghui Prefecture, which was tens of thousands of miles away. However, the interdomain transfer formation was not built in Pinghui Prefecture. It was built in a city at the edge of Pinghui Prefecture. This city was connected to two other prefectures, so it was very convenient to go anywhere. The four of them did not disturb the people here. Instead, they walked out of the city. As the old man walked, he suddenly turned his head and said, I heard that you can fly. Ling Shiqi nodded and said, I do have the means to fly. That's good. Let's see who can fly faster with each of us carrying one person. As soon as the old man finished speaking, he pulled Yan Ming and flew away. In the blink of an eye, only a black shadow was left. Ling Shiqi was stunned for a moment and did not react. Flying speed. What was going on? The brain circuit of a Sky Origin stage expert is too strange. Ling Shiqi muttered to himself. Then, he pulled Deng Xinlei and spread out two pairs of colorful wings behind him and soared into the sky. Soaring above the 9 heavens, Ling Shiqi's speed was extremely fast. Soon, he would catch up with the old man. Sky Origin stage experts were able to fly because they could still control a certain degree of heaven and earth. Wherever they were, they could claim to be a part of heaven and earth. Flying in the air was not a problem. However, unless they were people who specialized in flying, most of the Sky Origin stage experts were not very fast. Gradually, the old man was about to be caught up. The old man also felt that Ling Shiqi was slowly approaching. He suddenly felt a little embarrassed. The corner of his mouth curled up into a smile. In an instant, there were dark clouds everywhere, thunder rumbled, and endless thunder from the 9 heavens raged. Ling Shiqi was flying at an extremely fast speed when he suddenly plunged into the thunderclouds. He was shocked at first, but he realized that the power of these thunderbolts was not particularly strong, so he knew that the old man did not really want to make a move. He immediately activated the wild demon blood beast body and the golden light indestructible divine art. Terrifying thunderbolts struck his body and immediately produced a clang-clang sound, but they could not hurt him at all. Unfortunately, Deng Xinlei was knocked out by the sudden thunderbolt. Leng Shiqi had to use the purple pole thunderstorm to form a lightning field around Deng Xinlei to protect him. The four wings on his back shook, and in a few breaths, he forced his way out of the thundercloud. As soon as Leng Shiqi left the thundercloud, the sound of clapping hands could be heard. Clap, clap, clap. The old man stood 3,000 feet in the sky and clapped his hands as he watched Leng Shiqi pass through the thundercloud unscathed. Yan Ming floated beside him in a coma. The old man praised, "Not bad, not bad." As expected of the leader of the elite association. You did not lose face for the elite hall. Elite hall? Leng Shiqi was puzzled. He guessed that the old man did not really want to attack him, but he had never heard of the name elite hall. The old man raised his hand and threw over something that looked like a token. Leng Shiqi caught it in his hand. It was a token with the word elite engraved on it. The old man explained, "This is the identity token of the elite hall. It's normal that you haven't heard of the elite hall before, because there are less than 100 people who know about the elite hall. Only the previous leaders of the elite association are qualified to join this elite hall." Leng Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. If this was the case, then the old man in front of him was also the leader of the elite association of a certain session. No wonder eunuch Gao said that he had some relationship with the old man. "Yes, I was the leader of the elite association of 42 years ago." The old man said proudly, "Of course, not every leader of the elite association is qualified to join the elite hall. Even if you are at the late stage of Gang spirit realm at a young age and have become one of the 4 directors, you still have to pass my test. Although I don't mobilize the chi of heaven and earth, it is not something that an ordinary oneness of heaven and men realm can survive. However, you can pass through my thundercloud dimming formation so safely. It can be seen that you are worthy of your reputation." Speaking of this, the old man pointed to Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei who had fainted and continued, "You have the strength not weaker than the late stage of oneness of heaven and men realm and Gang spirit realm, and you are in a high position. Only then are you really qualified to join the elite association." Chapter 696. Leng Shiqi did not stand on ceremony and accepted the elite hall's token. According to the old man, those who could enter the elite hall were almost all abnormal people. Even if he just casually made friends with a few of them, it would still be very beneficial. Just as he thought of this, the old man pointed a finger at Leng Shiqi, and a bolt of lightning entered between his eyebrows. A chant immediately appeared in his mind. It was the 7th level spiritual skill, Purple Lightning Punishment All. "This is my greeting gift to you. It's not anything good, so don't mind it," the old man said casually. Leng Shiqi did not expect that the old man could casually throw out a rank 7 spiritual skill. One had to know that a rank 7 spiritual skill was a treasure that would be fought over anywhere. It could even become the most precious treasure of a first-rate faction. This further proved that the elite hall's potential was terrifying. "Thank you, senior." Leng Shiqi cupped his fists. The old man revealed a dissatisfied expression. "If you continue to call me senior, I will really get angry. The people in the elite hall all call each other brothers. They don't care about the red tape. You can just call me brother." Thank you, brother." Leng Shiqi said these words awkwardly. The old man laughed and put his arm around Leng Shiqi's shoulder. "That's right. Let's quickly destroy the 1,000 Illusion Sword sect. If there is a chance in the future, I will introduce you to the other brothers in the elite hall." "Oh right, the elite hall is a hidden faction. Don't tell others about it so easily." "Brother, don't worry. I know what to do." "That's good. Next, I will go to the 1,000 Illusion Sword sect to guard it in case that old man, 1,000 Illusion Sword Sovereign, plays any tricks." The old man did not even finish speaking before he flew away. Leng Shiqi shrugged. This old man's temper seemed a little strange. However, after interacting with him for a short period of time, he did not have to be so cautious. He had not felt this way in a long time. He did not want to delay important matters, so he brought Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei and flew towards Pinghui City. It was not until sunset that the three of them arrived at Pinghui City. At this time, Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei were following behind Ling Shiqi with gloomy faces. They had fainted for no reason and felt very embarrassed. When Ling Shiqi walked to the entrance of Pinghui City's Dark Thunder Manor, there were already hundreds of people gathered here. When they saw Ling Shiqi, who was dressed in a black and red official robe, they all knelt down and shouted, "Greetings, Chief Steward Liu. No need to be so courteous. Who is the patrol inspector of Pinghui County?" Ling Shiqi asked. The person standing at the very front replied, "This humble one is Wu Yizheng, the patrol inspector of the Dark Thunder Guards of Pinghui County." "You used to work for Li Juecheng?" Wu Yi's heart skipped a beat. The new general manager didn't welcome them or ask about the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. Instead, he asked this question. It seemed like he didn't come with good intentions. Wu Yi smiled and said, "In reply to my lord, the previous patrol inspector was dismissed a few days ago. This humble one also just took up the post." Ling Shiqi narrowed his eyes. He secretly thought that Chief Steward Hai's actions were really fast. He continued to ask, "Then do you know which general manager is in charge of Pinghui County?" Wu Yi was speechless. According to the scope of supervision, Pinghui County was indeed under Ling Shiqi's supervision. However, 2 days ago, Chief Steward Hai had already taken over the supervision of Pinghui County. He, Wu Yi, could also be considered one of Chief Steward Hai's people. However, he didn't dare to say such words in front of Ling Shiqi. He had specially inquired about Ling Shiqi's character and knew that he was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance and couldn't tolerate sand in his eyes. No matter how weak Ling Shiqi was, he was still one of the 4 general managers. If he really angered him, he definitely wouldn't have a good time. Wu Yi unknowingly broke out in a layer of cold sweat. It was really uncomfortable for him to be sandwiched between the 2 general managers. At this time, a spirit cultivator at the early stage of unity of heaven and man realm behind Wu Yi stepped forward and said, "Chief Steward Liu, this subordinate thinks that the most important thing right now is to assist the East Guarding Thunder Flame Army to destroy the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. Please enter the residence to discuss important matters." He came to help, but Ling Shiqi's eyes flashed with a cold light. "This person looks a little familiar." The person smiled and said, "Lord Liu, this subordinate was originally a eunuch under Chief Steward Hai, Zhang Hesu. Now, I have been transferred to Pinghui County." "Then what position do you hold now?" Zhang Hesu opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. In fact, he was sent by Chief Steward Hai to supervise. To put it bluntly, he was an imperial envoy. However, in reality, he didn't have any position. This subordinate hasn't received a position yet. In the end, he braced himself and said it. "Humph." Ling Shiqi snorted coldly. With a flip of his hand, the sky suddenly darkened and a terrifying spiritual pressure suddenly appeared. Everyone raised their heads in shock. It turned out that a huge mountain had suddenly appeared in the sky. It was shining with boundless golden light as it slowly descended, as if it was suppressing everything. 16 days transformation truth mountain suppression. Everyone was stunned for a moment. How could this Lord Liu make a move just like that? And looking at this posture, it was not a spiritual technique that a spirit cultivator of the spirit gang realm could use. Wu Yi was the first to react. He pulled back and shouted at the same time, "Retreat, retreat quickly." Fortunately, the speed of the mountain falling was not fast. Everyone activated their spiritual power and finally ran out of the range of the mountain. Zhang Hesu also wanted to escape, but he couldn't. Zhang Hesu was about to turn around and escape, but there was a terrible gravity at the bottom of the mountain. All of a sudden, his legs sank deep into the ground. He suddenly couldn't move. In horror, he immediately mobilized the spiritual power of heaven and earth around him to try to break free. However, a mysterious starry sky formation appeared at the bottom of the mountain. The spiritual power that Zhang Hesu had just gathered dissipated without a trace. Zhang Hesu's eyes widened. He was really stunned. He was a master of the unity of heaven and man realm, but he was powerless in front of Leng Shiqi, who was in the spirit gang realm. What made him even more frightened was that he saw Leng Shiqi's eyes were full of murderous intent. Zhang Hesu only realized at this moment that Leng Shiqi wanted to kill him. No. Lord Lu, you can't kill. However, before he could even finish his sentence, the gigantic mountain peak had already crashed down, causing the entire Pinghui city to tremble violently. Zhang Hesu's corpse was instantly obliterated. Even the Dark Thunder Mansion in the Pinghui prefecture was turned into ruins under this blow. Many Dark Thunder guards and all the people in the city looked at all this in horror. People who didn't know the situation thought that someone had come to attack Pinghui city. And the Dark Thunder guards, including Wu Yi, were even more shocked. Leng Shiqi, with the cultivation of the late stage of the spirit gang realm, killed a spirit cultivator of the unity of heaven and man realm in seconds. This level of battle prowess was too terrifying. Leng Shiqi clapped his hands as if he was driving away a fly. Do you have the right to speak here? Chapter 697. Leng Shiqi's killing of Zhang and Su shocked everyone, including Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei who came with him. At this moment, they finally understood why Leng Shiqi was qualified to be one of the 4 directors. He was so powerful at the late stage of Gang Spirit Realm. When Leng Shiqi broke through the oneness of heaven and men realm, he would have the power comparable to the late stage of oneness of heaven and men realm. What would happen when his cultivation reached the late stage of oneness of heaven and men realm? Hiss. Both of them secretly sucked in a breath of cold air and didn't dare to think about it anymore. However, in their hearts, there was no longer any disrespect for Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi stepped on the ruins of Dark Thunder Mansion and came to Wu Yi. He asked the question he had asked before, do you know which director is in charge of Pinghui Prefecture? Wu Yi also had the cultivation of the middle stage of oneness of heaven and men realm and was now the inspector. However, when he was asked by Leng Shiqi, his body trembled. Zhang and Su were not only masters of oneness of heaven and men realm but also trusted subordinates of Director Hai. Leng Shiqi killed them without any hesitation. He really didn't care about Director Hai at all. He took a deep breath and said, it belongs to Director Lu. Very good. Leng Shiqi patted Wu Yi on the shoulder and said, order people to clean up a place and prepare for the meeting. Wu Yi stiffly turned around and gave the order. In just a quarter of an hour, a decent meeting hall had been built. Leng Shiqi sat on the high seat and said, tell me, what's the situation now? Wu Yi bowed slightly and said, Your Excellency, the Eastern Thunder Flame Army has entered Pinghui Prefecture in succession these 2 days. Under the cover of the Dark Thunder Guards, they have scattered and hidden near the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. In addition, the city guards around the Discipline Commission and the Thousand Illusion Sword sect are ready to attack at any time. As long as General Lin, one of the 3 generals of the Eastern Thunder Flame Army, and the masters of the Imperial Hall of Worship arrive, they can attack the Thousand Illusion Sword sect at any time. Yes. Leng Shiqi nodded. It seemed that Wu Yi was quite capable. He had almost done everything. However, Leng Shiqi was still a little worried. After all, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect was a top sect that had been famous for a long time. It was definitely not something that could be destroyed so easily. He asked, are there any other problems that have not been resolved? My lord, there are 2 headaches right now. Wu Yi stretched out 2 fingers. First of all, because we've kept the information confidential, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect has yet to notice the impending crisis. Therefore, there were also some disciples who went out to do things or went down the mountain to gain experience. These people were quite a lot. There were at least 1,000 of them. If they were not eliminated, there would be trouble in the future. Although I have already ordered my subordinates to search for the disciples of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, I only know the whereabouts of 70% of them. Furthermore, these people are scattered all over the place. Some of them aren't even in Pinghui County. It will be difficult to eliminate them all. When Leng Shiqi heard this, a thoughtful look appeared on his face. It was indeed difficult to track down all the external disciples. The Dark Lightning Guard's information network was spread all over the place, but they had limited manpower. The best way to solve this problem was to have the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect take the initiative to recall those disciples. However, they couldn't let them know that the sect was in trouble. Otherwise, some of the disciples might just run away. Are there any special days in Pinghui County or the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect recently? Lin Shiqi suddenly had an idea. Wu Yi also guessed Lin Shiqi's intention. He pondered for a moment before saying, no. In fact, the Thousand Illusionary Swords Sovereign will hold a birthday banquet every 10 years. However, the most recent one was 4 years ago. In addition, the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect also holds a sect competition every 3 years. Unfortunately, it was held last year. It seems that there are no major events that are worthy of the sect recalling all the disciples recently. No, they are. Lin Shiqi said with certainty, you should know that the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect has joined the 9th Prince, Lei Haoqing, right? Yes, this point is already known to all. Wu Yi didn't know why Lin Shiqi would suddenly change the topic. Lei Haoge had violated His Majesty's taboo and was already under house arrest. What did this have to do with the destruction of the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect? A cold smile appeared on Lin Shiqi's face. Right now, not many people know the truth of what happened in the imperial capital. If we send someone to inform the Thousand Illusions Swords sect that Lei Haoqing obtained the position of Crown Prince, how do you think they'll react? Without a doubt, his eyes lit up and he said loudly, they'll definitely celebrate. After all, this is the hope of the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect. However, the people that the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect sent to the imperial capital are all dead. Without their message, how could the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect believe it so easily? You don't have to worry about that. I have my ways. What you need to do is to spread the news and reach a consensus with the city lords of the imperial capital and every city. You can't afford to make any mistakes, Lin Shiqi instructed. This humble one understands. What's the second problem? Wu Yi couldn't help but frown. That's the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect's protective formation. This formation is called the Thousand Illusionary 9 Pavilions Sword Formation. It's a killing formation, an illusion formation, and a trap formation. It's very difficult to deal with. Even if we have 2 Heavenly Origin stage experts, if the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect and the other experts personally take charge of the formation, we'll probably suffer a lot of casualties. Lin Shiqi also felt that this was a little difficult to deal with. This was the foundation of a top sect. Even if the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect had declined for decades, as long as the Thousand Illusionary 9 Pavilions Sword Formation existed, it would still be a colossus even if it didn't have a Heavenly Origin stage expert. Unless it was a matter of sacrificing lives, it wouldn't be easy to break the formation and destroy the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect. Lin Shiqi stood up as he thought of this. How long will it take for the Eastern Suppression Thunderflame Army to be in place? About 2 more days. I'll leave these matters to you. Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei will assist you. Lin Shiqi pointed at the 2 of them. Wu Yi knew that Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei's roles were actually the same as Zhang Hesu's. Now that he had acknowledged Lin Shiqi's strength and methods, he could only be manipulated by him. After Lin Shiqi said, I will go and take a look myself, he left Pinghui City in a carefree manner. Very quickly, Lin Shiqi directly teleported to the vicinity of the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect. He hid his figure and even used the Gu King to help him conceal his aura. He opened his supercilious eyes and began to slowly walk around the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect. He wanted to find some flaws and breakthrough points. However, the process didn't go smoothly. This was because the mountain where the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect was located originally formed the formation. It was on this foundation that the later generations set up the Thousand Illusionary 9 Pavilions Sword Formation. It was almost impossible to find any flaws. Just as Lin Shiqi was a little helpless, he suddenly discovered a familiar spirit aura in his supercilious eyes. He hadn't seen that aura for a long time, but at this moment, Lin Shiqi smiled gently and quickly approached. The owner of that spirit aura was the abandoned disciple of the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sect, Ozu. Chapter 698. Now, Ozu had reached the early stage of Gang's spirit realm, and his temperament had changed greatly. He was no longer Yushu, but full of calmness and restraint. At this moment, he was standing at the top of a hill, looking at the sect of the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect in the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Suddenly, a figure fell from the sky. Ozu stabbed out with his sword without turning his head. Suddenly, the dreamlike sword light swept in all directions. At the same time, several illusions were mixed in the sword light, making it impossible to guard against. However, the figure held a green feather fan in his hand. After a while, he raised the wind and swept the world. All the sword light was swept away. Ozu frowned and turned around. His eyes were full of a look as if he was facing a great enemy. However, when he saw the person who came, he put away his posture and said, "How should I call you?" The person who came was Ling Shiqi. He smiled, took back the green feather wind forest fan, and said, "My real name is Lu Xingji." Lu Xingji. Ozu murmured, "I seem to have heard of it somewhere." Now the news that Ling Shiqi had become one of the 4 directors had spread to the world. Almost everyone knew his identity, but Ozu hadn't been to the town in recent days, so he didn't know the specific identity of Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi looked at Ozu, who had just entered the Gang's spirit realm, and there was a faint aura of isolation on his body. He must have never gone out of the small secret realm of the southern divine peak. He didn't come out until he reached the Gang's spirit realm. "Brother Ziyu, now that you have broken out of seclusion and appeared near the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect, what are your plans?" Ozu didn't answer, but asked, "Why is Brother Lu here? You must not be here to see the scenery." "Of course not." Ling Shiqi sized up Ozu and guessed his purpose for coming here. "Perhaps our purpose is the same." Ling Shiqi remembered that Ozu had been tricked by the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect back then and had almost been soul-searched into a fool. Later on, he had managed to escape with great difficulty, but his family had all died at the hands of the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect. The Thousand Illusions Sword Sect also accused him of having an affair with a witch and betraying the sect, making him unable to raise his head for the rest of his life. This kind of hatred could be said to be irreconcilable. At that time, Ozu said that he wouldn't come out of seclusion until he reached the spirit realm, but now, he reached the Gang's spirit realm. And he specially came to the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect. What did he want to do? Ling Shiqi didn't believe that he was here to enjoy the scenery. Therefore, Ling Shiqi reckoned that Ozu was most likely here for revenge. Ling Shiqi's biggest headache right now was the sect protecting formation of the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect. If he wanted to destroy the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect with the least amount of casualties, he had to find a way to break the sword formation of the Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions. It was possible to use human lives to force a breakthrough, but what Ling Shiqi wanted was credit. Of course, the fewer people who died, the more credit he would get. Therefore, he did not want to use this method unless he had no other choice. At this moment, Ozu's unexpected appearance gave Ling Shiqi a chance. Ozu was the most outstanding disciple of the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect. He might know something about the Thousand Illusion 9 Pavilion sword formation. Ozu looked up and down at Ling Shiqi. He couldn't see through Ling Shiqi anymore. He only knew that if Ling Shiqi wanted to kill him, it wouldn't take much effort. He simply said, "Brother Lu, what do you want to say? Just say it." Brother Ziyu is straightforward. Ling Shiqi clapped his hands and set up a restriction around him. He said, "To tell you the truth, I'm here to take revenge on the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect." Revenge? What enmity do you have with the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect? Ozu didn't quite believe his words. "Brother Ziyu, have you forgotten that when I left the small secret realm, you specially reminded me to be careful of the people from the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect? As you expected, there was indeed a spirit gang realm expert from the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect hiding on the southern divine peak. I almost died at the hands of that person. If it weren't for the help of a benefactor, I'm afraid I would have been buried in the southern divine peak. Do you think I have any enmity with the Thousand Illusion Sword sect? Ling Shiqi explained. Ozu's face also showed some disgust. The people of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect are really so despicable and shameless. If what you said is true, I think we might as well cooperate. Hearing this, Ling Shiqi thought to himself that it was as expected. Oh. Brother Ziyu, do you have the same idea as me? That's great. With your understanding of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect and my forces, we might be able to shake the Thousand Illusion Sword sect if we join forces. You still have forces? How strong are they? Ling Shiqi smiled mysteriously. In short, they're not weak. Now, as long as we can break the sect-protecting formation of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, I'm confident that I can deal a heavy blow to the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. You're so confident? Ozu asked suspiciously. He knew the Thousand Illusion Sword sect very well. Even if the Thousand Illusion Sword sect had begun to decline, there were still many experts in the Unity of Heaven realm and dozens of Spirit Gang realm experts in the sect. Even without the Thousand Illusion 9 Pavilion Sword formation, unless another top sect came to attack, it would be wishful thinking to deal a heavy blow to the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. Ling Shiqi saw Ozu's suspicion. Brother Ziyu, you've been in seclusion all year round, so you're very isolated from the outside world. Do you know that the Thousand Illusion Sword sect has long been involved in the fight for the throne? The Thousand Illusion Sword sect wants to take a gamble. If the prince they support wins the throne, then the Thousand Illusion Sword sect may even become the state religion of the Thunderfire dynasty. The danger of decline will naturally be easily solved. Unfortunately, the 9th prince they support has already been defeated, and the Thousand Illusion Sword sect has attracted the hostility of the Thunderfire dynasty. Now, the Dark Thunder Guards and the Discipline Commission in Pinghui Prefecture are preparing to attack the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. A portion of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect's experts have already died in the imperial capital. In addition, the Thousand Illusion Sword Venerable's chi and blood have already declined. How much strength does he have left? Therefore, the Thousand Illusion Sword sect is facing a huge crisis. If it's not handled well, a large amount of territory will be taken away by the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. In the future, when the Thousand Illusion Sword Venerable reaches the end of his life, the Thousand Illusion Sword sect will be in danger of being exterminated. And I am the supervisor of the Dark Thunder Guards. This time, I'm here to put pressure on the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. As long as Brother Ziyu helps me, the Thousand Illusion Sword sect's vitality will definitely be greatly damaged. This is what you and I both want to see. Ling Shiqi's words were 70% true and 30% false. This kind of lie was the most difficult to distinguish. After hearing this, Ozu fell into deep thought. After a while, he said, all of this is just your side of the story. How can I believe you? Ling Shiqi shook his head and said, you can choose not to believe me, but I have no need to lie to you. Moreover, what I said is a secret. Outsiders have no way of knowing, and I can't prove it to you. In fact, is it really that important whether you believe me or not? Our goal is the same, and that's enough. Ozu hesitated for a moment, then nodded and said, you're right. Speak, what do you want me to do? Chapter 699. The next morning, a travel-worn disciple of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect rushed to the mountain gate. Several disciples guarding the mountain immediately stopped him. One of them asked, Senior Brother Ji Guang, didn't you go to the capital? Why are you back? Ji Guang hugged the person's shoulder and said excitedly, good news, good news. The 9th prince has obtained the position of crown prince and will soon ascend the throne. At that time, our Thousand Illusions Sword sect will be conferred as the state religion. What? Is this true? A few of the disciples nearby also gathered around, and a burst of joy appeared on their faces. The sect had long since submitted to the 9th prince, Lei Haoqing. This was something everyone knew, so the disciples all hoped that the sect would make the right bet. This way, not only would the Thousand Illusions Sword sect obtain a huge amount of resources, after becoming the state religion, they would be able to ignore the Dark Thunder Guards and the Discipline Commission and wantonly steal talented disciples. Then, the Thousand Illusions Sword sect's predicament of lacking manpower would naturally no longer exist. Now that they heard Ji Guang's words, they were unable to contain their joy. Although they were still asking if it was true, they already believed it in their hearts. Of course it's true. Ji Guang said firmly, quickly take me to see the sect master. I want to report this good news to him. Okay, but senior brother Ji Guang, as long as you enter the sect, you still have to be checked. Please forgive me. This is the sect's rule. Take it. Ji Guang said as he handed over a white jade stone. This was the unique identity token of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect disciples. The disciple guarding the mountain took out a palm-sized disc and placed the jade stone inside. Immediately, Ji Guang's name appeared on the disc. Senior brother Ji Guang, please take the token. We will go see the sect master now. Let's go, let's go. The two immediately walked through the mountain gate and quickly walked towards the peak of the sect. This Ji Guang also secretly let out a sigh of relief. He was also secretly glad that he had met Oziu. Otherwise, no matter how exquisite his disguise was, he would have been discovered as a fake at the mountain gate. That's right, in reality, this Ji Guang was the Leng Shiqi after changing his appearance and cultivation. At first, he thought of a way to get the Thousand Illusions Sword sect to call back all their disciples, which was to pretend to be disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect and give them false information. However, after communicating with Oziu, he found out that all the disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect had to be inspected before entering the mountain gate. Even the elders had to be inspected. Leng Shiqi immediately contacted the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards and sent over the identity token of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect's accompanying disciple, which led to this scene. In order not to be discovered by the experts of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, he had specially learned the first few levels of the Thousand Illusions Sword technique from Oziu. At this moment, he was circulating this technique in his body. Unless it was someone very familiar with him, no one would be able to tell that he was not Ji Guang at all. Soon, Leng Shiqi met the current sect leader of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, Wei Qiyan. Wei Qiyan was a great master at the peak of the oneness of heaven and man realm. It was said that he was only 60 or 70 years old this year, which was considered very young for someone in the oneness of heaven and man realm. However, when Leng Shiqi saw him, most of Wei Qian's hair had already turned white, and even his face had many wrinkles. To be able to make a dignified unity of heaven cultivator like this, it could be seen that Wei Qiyan was really mentally and physically exhausted for the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. As soon as Leng Shiqi walked in, he happily recounted the matter. At first, Wei Qiyan was not as happy as the disciples guarding the mountain. Instead, he did not dare to believe it. Is what you said true? What evidence do you have? Why didn't Yenmu send the message through the sound transmission formation, and instead let you come all the way here to report? Wei Qiyan asked 3 important questions in a row. Leng Shiqi was naturally prepared. He replied, Sect leader, Elder Yen displayed his might in Void Scar Sky and snatched the heavenly Thunderfire Pearl that symbolizes the position of the Crown Prince. He seized the position of the Eastern Palace for the 9th Prince. However, because of this, he was seriously injured and is still unconscious. Everyone in the imperial capital knows about this. However, the 9th Prince has not been officially conferred the position of Eastern Palace, so the news has not spread. If sect leader does not believe me, you can ask around for news from the imperial capital. It is absolutely true. I believe this news will spread throughout the Thunderfire dynasty in a few days. Speaking of this, Wei Qiyan showed a bit of joy, and also a bit of relief. Good, you have all done well. Wei Qiyan praised, I will immediately report this matter to the Grand Elder. You can go and rest first. You will definitely be rewarded. Leng Shiqi's face lit up with joy, many thanks, sect leader. This disciple will take his leave first. He walked out of the hall and thought to himself, the first step has finally been successful. Leng Shiqi was not worried that Wei Qiyan would not rush all the disciples back. It had to be known that the more powerful a sect was, the more they cared about their reputation. The Thousand Illusionary Swords sect had been weak for decades, and their days were getting worse and worse. The first-rate sects in Pinghui Prefecture were no longer as respectful to them as before. Therefore, the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect finally had a chance to turn things around. They would definitely not give up this opportunity to increase their reputation. Leng Shiqi was sure that the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect would definitely rush all the disciples to celebrate. They would also tell all the sects in Pinghui Prefecture about this matter and show off. Right now, the most important thing for Leng Shiqi was another matter, and that was the Thousand Illusionary Nine Pavilions sword formation. After leaving Wei Qian's hall, Leng Shiqi found Ji Guang's residence by beating around the bush. Then, he disguised himself and secretly snuck out. Soon, he arrived at an inconspicuous hill in the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect. He looked at the bottomless pool in front of him and muttered, "Is this the place?" Then, he opened his hand and a person suddenly appeared beside him. It was Oziu. Oziu didn't come from anywhere else, nor did he hide. He came from Leng Shiqi's underworld. After Oziu agreed to join forces with Leng Shiqi invited him to join the underworld. This Oziu was originally a one-in-a-million genius. Later on, he even obtained the inheritance of the Divine Dream Palace. In the future, he would definitely become an expert who could intimidate a region. He was definitely qualified to join the underworld. Moreover, Leng Shiqi had some friendship with him back then. Now that they were on the same side, Leng Shiqi decided to invite him to join the underworld. And the inheritance and title that Oziu obtained from the underworld was the 10 halls Yamalu and Huan Wang. It was worth mentioning that after Leng Shiqi killed Zhang Hesu in Pinghui City, he also met the conditions for the underworld to level up. However, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to escape when the underworld leveled up. Seeing that a great battle was about to happen, he planned to level up the underworld after destroying the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect just in case. Oziu walked to the edge of the deep pool and gently stirred it a few times. He said, "That's right. This is one of the 9 array cores of the Thousand Illusionary 9 Pavilions sword formation." Chapter 700. The mountain range where the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect is located has a natural trapping array. They used the 9 array cores of this natural array as the foundation to set up the Thousand Illusionary 9 Pavilions sword array. This deep pool is one of the array cores. I only found this place by chance. Oziu explained. Leng Shiqi was also somewhat puzzled. Since this is the array core, it's extremely important to the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect. Why is there no one guarding it? It's all because the people of the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect think they're smart. They think that the more unguarded it is, the less people will think that this is the array core. Moreover, this array core is naturally formed. Although it's in the deep pool, no one knows its exact location. So that's how it is. Then how can Brother Ziyu determine the location of the array core? Oziu gave Leng Shiqi a meaningful look and said, "I couldn't before, but I can now." Immediately after, Oziu sat on the ground, his entire body emitting a mysterious aura. His fingers flew up, and after a dozen breaths of time, he suddenly said, "Found it." Leng Shiqi could see that Oziu seemed to have obtained an extraordinary ability from the inheritance of the king of Luanzhuan. Thanks to Brother Lu, the inheritance I obtained is related to the art of divination. Everything in the world, including the 5 elements and yin and yang, can be traced. I've already found the location of the array core. Oziu said with a smile. His eyes were filled with gratitude towards Leng Shiqi. The art of divination. Leng Shiqi was also quite surprised. He had heard of the art of divination before. Those divination masters could lock onto the location of people, things, and things with just a few clues. They could even predict the future. However, there were very few divination masters. They were even rarer than alchemy grandmasters. In any case, Ling Shiqi had never met one before. Now, Oziyu had obtained this ability from the inheritance of the king of Luanzhuan. Moreover, he could easily deduce the exact location of the array core. This alone was shocking enough. He said, Brother Ziyu, having this ability is great news for the underworld. It will be much easier to deal with the 1,000 illusionary sword sect this time. Exactly. It isn't just this formation core, I'm able to deduce the location of the other 8 formation cores as well. So long as we tamper with the formation cores, then the illusory 9 pavilion sword formation might not even be able to activate normally. Leave this matter to me. I can secretly destroy these array cores without anyone noticing. Oziyu's words were filled with hatred for the 1,000 illusion sword sect. Ling Shiqi nodded. Oziyu had the ability to deduce. As long as he did not take the initiative to show himself, no one would be able to discover him. As long as he could get rid of the 1,000 illusions 9 pavilion sword formation, there would be no more trouble in attacking the 1,000 illusions sword sect. This encounter with Oziyu had really helped him a lot. In that case, we'll be rid of Brother Ziyu. This thing can help us pass on information. Ling Shiqi took out a small ball and handed it to him. This was actually what Li Jueqing used to use in the past. Li Jueqing had planted spies around eunuch Gao and Ling Shiqi. As long as there was important information, it would be passed on through this thing. Now it had fallen into the hands of Ling Shiqi. He left Oziyu here to continue looking for the formation cores and tampering with them, while he himself teleported back to Pinghui City through the Fate skill. After a day, when Ling Shiqi saw Wu Yi again, he found that he was standing in front of a burly man with thick eyebrows, bowing his head and waist. Seeing Ling Shiqi return, he hurriedly said, Lord Lu, this is General Lin, one of the 3 generals of the East guarding Thunder Flame Army. General Lin, this is the new chief of the Dark Thunder Guards, Lord Lu. General Lin was clad in armor. Just by standing there, he gave people a feeling of unparalleled dominance. He was an expert of the Tianyuan realm who guarded a region. He said in a very deep voice, You are Lu Xingji. You have become one of the 4 chiefs in the Gang's spirit realm. You are quite capable. General Lin, you flatter me. Ling Shiqi said modestly, I heard that General Lin once guarded the customs and defeated tens of thousands of troops from overseas countries by yourself. Your courage is admirable. General Lin's name was Lin Yuanliang. He was one of the 3 generals of the East guarding Thunder Flame Army and was responsible for guarding the coastal border of Donglin County. The Falling Star continent was surrounded by the sea. Naturally, there were many islands. Over time, some sects, forces and dynasties of various sizes would form. 10 years ago, the countries of the East Sea tried to plot against Donglin County. They were quite smart. They bypassed the border and sneaked ashore through a small path. They thought that they would be able to catch the Thunderblaze dynasty off guard, but in the end, they bumped into Lin Yuanliang. Lin Yuanliang showed his invincible power and killed a Tianyuan realm expert of the countries of the East Sea by himself. What's more, the army was utterly defeated and fled back to the East Sea. Since then, Lin Yuanliang's name shocked the whole Thunder Flame Army. With such a powerful cultivator and the old man from the Imperial Hall of Worship, how could the aged 1,000 Illusions Sword Master be a match for the 2 of them? It seemed that everything was ready to destroy the 1,000 Illusion Sword sect. Lin Yuanliang acted as if he didn't hear Ling Shiqi's flattery and said bluntly, I've always been straightforward. I heard that Lord Lu has a way to gather the disciples of the 1,000 Illusion Sword sect and plans to break the 1,000 Illusion 9 Pavilion Sword formation. How are the preparations? Wu Yi knew that Ling Shiqi's temper wasn't very good. Now that Lin Yuanliang was so aggressive, he was afraid that the 2 would have a conflict. He immediately tried to smooth things over. General Lin, I just received news that the 1,000 Illusion Sword sect has begun to gather all the external disciples. It said that it's a celebration for the 9th prince to become the crown prince. Lei Haoqing. Crown prince? Lin Yuanliang raised his eyebrows, this is different from what I know. Before he finished his sentence, he suddenly paused and clapped his hands. So that's how it is. Lord Lu only used one day to make the Thousand Illusion Sword sect receive false information and believe it to be true. Just based on this, regardless of what others say, I acknowledge you as one of the 4 great chiefs. Leng Shiqi continued, not only that, I also found the Thousand Illusion 9 Pavilion Sword Formation's core and secretly tampered with it. This formation is no longer a threat. Hearing this, Wu Yi and Lin Yuanliang were both shocked and felt that it was too unreal. In just one day, he had given the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect false information, found the array core of the sect protecting formation, and even tampered with it. Was there really someone who could do this? Leng Shiqi really thought that the Thousand Illusion Sword sect was his own backyard and that he could come and go as he pleased without anyone noticing. What was even stranger was that they had never heard of Leng Shiqi knowing how to use formations. To be able to easily find the sect protecting formation's core and even tamper with it, one had to be a great formation master. After just a few words, Lin Yuanliang felt that Leng Shiqi seemed to be hiding many secrets. Wu Yi was even more unable to see through Leng Shiqi. He secretly thought that he was indeed extraordinary to be able to become one of the 4 great chiefs at such a young age. Chapter 701. After that, Leng Shiqi, Lin Yuanliang, and Wu Yi discussed the details of the plan. In 2 days, they would attack the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. The Dark Thunder Guards and Discipline Commission of the Pinghui Prefecture began to move. All the experts split up and arrived near the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. The 10,000 soldiers of the Eastern Suppression Thunder Flame Army were also ready. Every soldier here was at least at the Spirit Transformation realm. They could be called the best army of the Thunder Flame dynasty. 2 days later, it was time for the Thousand Illusion Sword sect to hold their celebration. Originally, they wanted to invite the nearby sects to participate, but it was too rushed, so they gave up. As long as they spread the news, those sects would come to flatter them in the future. On this day, the Thousand Illusion Sword sect's sect master, Wei Qiyan, and several elders at the Unity of Heaven realm were sitting in a large square. In front of them were tens of thousands of disciples. Even though the Thousand Illusion Sword sect had declined, it was still a top sect. There were still many people who wanted to join the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. In the past, they were most worried about the talented disciples. Sect Master Wei Qiyan stood up. His face was flushed red. He had also inquired about the news from the imperial capital. The response he received was just as Leng Shiqi had said. Wei Qiyan was sure of it, so he decided to hold the celebration. The only thing that made him feel suspicious was that Ji Guang had secretly left the mountain. But this time, Wei Qiyan didn't care too much. It was as if he could already see the Thousand Illusion Sword sect rising again and standing among the strong. His mentality had changed due to the great joy. At this moment, he began to talk at length. Many of the disciples were very excited. However, just when they were at their most excited and happy, a voice came from the distance. The Thousand Illusion Sword sect is holding a celebration without inviting guests. How low-key. I came uninvited, please forgive me. Yu Qiyan frowned and turned around with all the disciples, only to see a few disciples who were guarding the mountain running up in a panic. They shouted as they ran, "Head, the Dark Thunder Guards and the people from the Discipline Commission are here. Many masters are blocking the mountain gate. Why are the Dark Thunder Guards and Discipline Commission here at this time?" Wei Qiyan was filled with doubt. Usually, they didn't interfere with each other's business. Now that the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect had made a great contribution, could it be that they were here to congratulate them? After all, the status of the Thousand Illusions Swords sect would no longer be the same as before. It would definitely be higher than the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards, so it was reasonable for them to come and congratulate him. However, Wei Qiyan heard that the voice was full of sarcasm and ridicule. It seemed that the visitor was not friendly. "Let's go and take a look," he ordered, and all the cultivators walked toward the mountain gate. When they saw Leng Shiqi standing at the front in his black and red official robe, and behind him were thousands of Dark Thunder Guards and Masters of the Discipline Commission, each with a stern look, Wei Qiyan had a bad feeling. He didn't recognize Leng Shiqi, but he recognized the official uniform he was wearing. It was clearly the uniform of the Dark Thunder Guard's 4th Chief Steward. When Wei Qiyan contacted the Imperial capital, he also knew that the Dark Thunder Guard had a Gang Spirit Realm 4th Chief Steward. At first, he secretly mocked him, but now he saw him. Wei Qiyan didn't think that the 4th Chief Steward came to the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect in person to congratulate him. He symbolically cupped his hands. In terms of status, he didn't think that he was inferior to the 4th Chief Steward. You must be Lord Lu. Congratulations on your high position at such a young age. I wonder what brings you to our Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. Leng Shiqi said 2 words, gifts. What gifts? Swish. Leng Shiqi took out an imperial edict and said, by His Majesty's order, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect colluded with the 9th Prince to disturb the imperial court and meddle in the battle for the Crown Prince. Nonsense. Wei Qiyan immediately shouted, our Thousand Illusionary Sword sect clearly helped the 9th Prince to become the Crown Prince. How can we be guilty? Lord Lu, don't talk nonsense. You should know that trouble comes from careless talk. Leng Shiqi sneered, Wei Qiyan, do you think I'm here to play with you? Cut the crap. Today is the day your Thousand Illusionary Sword sect will be destroyed. Ha ha ha, ridiculous. Wei Qiyan laughed disdainfully, you want to destroy our Thousand Illusionary Sword sect? It's too ridiculous. Lord Lu, you're so young. Why is your brain not working well? General Lin, it's time for you to show up. Leng Shiqi said to the air in the distance. Immediately, dense figures swarmed out from all directions. Those people were neat and uniform and surrounded the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect at an extremely fast speed. Wei Qian's expression changed. He recognized that those people were the East Guarding Thunder Flame army of the Thunder Flame dynasty. There were more than 10,000 people as far as the eye could see. When did so many people hide near the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect? At this moment, he withdrew his disdain and arrogance. If these tens of thousands of East Guarding Thunder Flame army were added, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect would really face a bitter battle. However, what truly frightened him was that, at some unknown time, there was a person standing high in the sky, looking down at them from above. That gaze was like looking at a group of dead people. This person was Lin Yuanliang. Due to his great reputation in the coastal provinces, he was quickly recognized by many disciples of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. Wei Qiyan was even more shocked, you're Lin Yuanliang. At this moment, his heart sank to the bottom of the valley. If he was worried about a bitter battle, he finally realized that the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect might really be destroyed today. Others might still think that they were lucky. After all, the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect also had the Heavenly Origin Stage Thousand Illusionary Sword Sovereign. However, as the sect leader, Wei Qiyan knew better than anyone that their Supreme Elder was already in a weakened state. How could he be a match for Lin Yuanliang? Leng Shiqi said, Wei Qiyan, do you still think that my words are laughable? General Lin, a long delay may lead to trouble. Give the order. Lin Yuanliang did not answer. He pointed one finger at the sky and the wind and clouds changed. Then, he clawed down. As if tearing the sky and earth apart, 5 hair-thin black lines appeared in the void. Wei Qiyan was shocked. If he touched it, he would die instantly. However, suddenly, a bright sword light shot up into the sky from the back mountain of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a shocking sword radiance and cut off the 5 black lines. An extremely old figure appeared across the sky. He was the Supreme Elder of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect, the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sovereign. Lin Yuanliang said coldly, let me see how much power the Supreme Elder of the Thousand Illusionary Sword Sovereign has left. Leng Shiqi looked at Wei Qiyan and the disciples of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. His killing intent rose and he waved his hand, Kill. Chapter 702. More than 10,000 masters rushed up at once, especially the East Town Thunder Flame Army, the Dark Thunder Guards, and the masters in the Oneness of Heaven and Men realm and the Gang Spirit realm of the Discipline Department. They took the lead and rushed over like a sharp knife. All the disciples of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect immediately panicked. Just a moment ago, it was still a celebratory atmosphere, but now it was a disaster. Although they were disciples of top sects and had their own pride, they still found it difficult to remain calm in the face of life and death. Yu Qiyan's face darkened. He knew that he could not panic at this time. He also knew that it was difficult to calm people with a few words, so he did not dare to hesitate and immediately shouted, "Open the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions." At present, they were far inferior to the Leng Shiqi in both numbers and combat power, so they could only rely on the sect-protecting formation. Moreover, Yu Qiyan was very confident in the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions. Even if Lin Yuanliang was here, as long as the Thousand Illusion Sword Master was in the formation, he might be able to defeat Lin Yuanliang. He took out a formation plate and poured his spirit force into it. 9 places in the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect lit up with a dazzling light. There was even a trace of a dreamy feeling. Just looking at it would make one feel intoxicated. Seeing this, Yu Qiyan's face finally became a little better. If the formation was opened, they would have the ability to fight. Many disciples of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect were indeed much calmer. The sect-protecting formation has been opened. Is this the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions? It's really powerful. With the protection of the formation, we may be able to fight. However, the next moment, Yu Qiyan's expression suddenly froze. Because when the spiritual light of the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions was about to converge into the real formation, it strangely dissipated. Many disciples of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect were also confused. They had never seen the formation open. Could it be that the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions was like this? Yu Qiyan's eyes widened, and he almost choked to death. Including him, the senior members of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect knew that the sword formation of Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions had collapsed by itself. One of the formation masters panicked and said, "Leader, the formation eye of the sect-protecting formation has been destroyed. We have a mole here." "What did you say?" Yu Qiyan was so angry that he almost lost control. He instantly turned around and looked at Leng Shiqi. The look in his eyes was as if he wanted to swallow Leng Shiqi alive. "It's you." Although Wei Qiyan couldn't find out who the traitor was, he was sure that it was Leng Shiqi. Leng Shiqi sneered. In fact, he could have launched a sneak attack directly. There was no need to talk nonsense with Yu Qiyan from the beginning. The reason why he did this was because he wanted to attack the Thousand Illusions Sword sect openly. He wanted to intimidate them with his strength and force Wei Qiyan to activate the sect-protecting formation. The sect protection formation could be considered their strongest protection, and it was also equivalent to a life-saving straw. It could be said that everyone had placed their hopes on the Thousand Illusions 9 pavilions sword formation. When this hope was shattered, the disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect would be at their weakest. When there was hope and then there was despair, after a huge fluctuation in the state of mind, it would also greatly affect their combat effectiveness. Now, tens of thousands of soldiers and secret thunder guards had killed their way into the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. These disciples, who were usually elites of the top sects, were killed without any power to fight back and were utterly defeated. As the saying goes, a defeated army is like a landslide. In this fight, the Thousand Illusions Sword sect was already on the verge of defeat. In addition, in terms of high-end combat effectiveness, Leng Shiqi's side was 3 times that of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. Moreover, they were all experts carefully cultivated by the Thunderstorm dynasty. Their combat effectiveness was no weaker than that of the disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. In just a few fights, several disciples of the Gang Spirit realm of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect had died. Wei Qiyan's mind was blank. He had worked hard all his life to save the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, but he had never thought that the Thousand Illusions Sword sect would face a situation of collapse. What was even more unexpected was that a top sect would be defeated so quickly. Not only was it defeated, but if it went on like this, it would not be long before the Thousand Illusions Sword sect completely disappeared from the world. The sect that Wei Qi-yen had worked hard all his life to manage was about to disappear. He could no longer control himself. With red eyes, he rushed directly to the Leng Shiqi like a fierce beast. Wu Yi, Yan Ming, and Deng Xinlei, who were beside Leng Shiqi, moved at the same time and stopped in front of him. Wei Qi-yen held a 7th-level spiritual sword in his hand and set up a misty sword net with a turn of his hand. Suddenly, the spiritual power of heaven and earth became violent, and Wu Yi and the other two were momentarily absent-minded. In this short moment, Wei Qi-yan's sword net suddenly broke out, leaving horrible sword marks on the bodies of Wu Yi and the other two in an instant. The three of them were also at the middle stage of the oneness of heaven and men realm, but they were vulnerable in front of the furious Wei Qi-yen. It was not their fault that they were too weak. In fact, since they could become inspectors or supervisors of the secret Thunder Guards, their combat effectiveness was absolutely among the top of the same level. It could only be said that Wei Qi-yen was too strong. He was a great master at the peak of the oneness of heaven and men realm and had been trying to break through to the Tianyuan realm. Not to mention that he was the leader of a top sect and could use all the resources at will. There was no doubt that his strength was strong. However, Wu Yi and the others had also bought some time for Leng Shiqi. Boom! Leng Shiqi activated the wild demon blood beast body and Vajra indestructible divine art. Coupled with the Gu King's possession, his body was filled with all kinds of strange auras that were unpredictable. He held the 10 directions fluttering snow spear in his right hand, and bursts of crimson ice crystals spread out, instantly forming a crimson hell. He held the blood-stained star demonic saber tightly in his left and right hand, and a saber light that could tear heaven and earth slashed out, slashing the physical body and the primordial spirit. Divine night blooming epiphyllum. Leng Shiqi stretched out his arms behind his back, and black and white streams of light intertwined and spiraled. A yin and yang dragon soared in the sky, and the surrounding spiritual power of heaven and earth became chaotic. Flying dragon great void. Just after Wu Yi and the other two were repelled, Wei Qi-yen saw the powerful eruption of Leng Shiqi. He couldn't help but be surprised. Leng Shiqi gave him a feeling that he was more powerful than Wu Yi and the other two masters at the oneness of heaven and men realm. He was only at the gang spirit realm, but he had such a strong fighting capacity. His potential could only be described as terrifying. However, this level of attack was still a little weak in the eyes of Wei Qi-yen. He stood with his sword horizontally and flicked the sword with one finger. In an instant, a sword sound surged out, tearing the crimson hell apart and even twisting the yin and yang dragon. Wei Qi-yen stabbed again. The glaze-like sword light flashed and cut off the short-lived saber light as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The momentum of the sword light didn't diminish, and it cut the yin and yang dragon in the sky into 2 pieces. Leng Shiqi was shocked. It turned out that the peak of the oneness of heaven and men realm in his heyday was so powerful. When he killed Li Jueqing before, he only saw Hua Luyue seriously injure Li Jueqing with one move. Now he thought that Hua Luyue's strength was also abnormally strong. However, this made Leng Shiqi more eager to fight. Anyway, he had 2 masters at the Tianyuan realm here, and there were several masters at the oneness of heaven and men realm from the discipline commission around him. His own safety was guaranteed. Even if there was an accident, he could hide in the mansion of the dead. Since there was no worry, Leng Shiqi also wanted to test his limit on Wei Qi-yen. Chapter 703. Wei Qi-yen easily broke Leng Shiqi's attack, and the killing intent in his heart grew stronger. Even if he couldn't escape the calamity of extermination today, he would drag Leng Shiqi down with him. At this moment, an invisible blade suddenly hit Wei Qi-yen. It was the short-lived primordial spirit saber light. Wei Qi-yen immediately showed some pain. He was also very surprised that there was an invisible saber light that strangely tore at his spiritual power. However, as the sect leader of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect, he also cultivated illusions. His spiritual power had long condensed into a primordial spirit, and he quickly annihilated the invisible saber light. And Ling Shiqi was not alone. After Wu Yi was forced to retreat, he seized this good opportunity. He slapped out a palm print from afar, but there were eerie ghosts in the palm print, howling incessantly. Yan Ming held a heavy long staff and smashed it down. A staff shadow that was hundreds of feet long blasted toward Wei Qi Yan with great force. Deng Xinlei had the strength to pull up a mountain. His entire body was stirred up with vigorous aura energy. He punched out as if he could shatter mountains and rivers. They knew very well that they were no match for Wei Qi Yan, but as long as they could delay him, the sect leader, it was the best thing for them. Wei Qi Yan was very impatient. With a flip of his left hand, he took out a 7th-level spirit sword. 2 swords came out at the same time. One sword was like dreamy glass that intoxicated people, while the other was like a white steed flashing through a crack, as fast as lightning. These were the 2 sword moves in the Thousand Illusionary Sword technique, created by the founder of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. One was inclined towards illusions, and the other was inclined towards speed. The founder combined the 2 sword moves into one. For a time, he was invincible and had never created such a huge foundation as the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect. Unfortunately, none of his descendants could completely combine the 2 sword moves. At most, they could only use the 2 sword moves separately like Wei Qi Yan. Although the power was definitely not as good as the complete move, it was still powerful enough. The 2 completely different sword moves instantly broke the attack of Wu Yi and the other 2. They didn't stop Wei Qi Yan for long at all. When Wu Yi and the others stopped Wei Qi Yan, Ling Shiqi's 4 arms formed seals at the same time. What was shocking was that he was actually forming 4 completely different seals at the same time. Ling Shiqi's body flashed with red, green, blue, and yellow spirit energy. Among them, the red spirit energy soared into the sky. The cry of a phoenix broke through the 9 heavens, and a vivid shadow of a fire bird soared into the sky. Bursts of flames caused the surrounding temperature to rise sharply. 16 heavens transformations, immortal bird. Green spiritual energy spread out, and the wind within a radius of a few miles became violent. Countless wind blades cut through the air, and it was like a wind prison. 16 heavens transformations, calling the wind. In the blink of an eye, the blue spiritual power raised monstrous waves, and a huge water dragon overturned the river and the sea, as if it wanted to swallow everything. 16 heaven transformations true insight, water dragon soul. The yellow spiritual energy transformed into a towering mountain peak that covered the sky and the sun. It carried with it the power to shake the earth and kill in all directions. 16 heavens transformations, mountain suppression. Ling Shiqi was actually using 4 7th-level spiritual skills at the same time. Such a huge movement immediately attracted everyone's attention. Whether it was the people of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, the Dark Thunder Guards, the Discipline Commission, or the Eastern Thunder Flame Army, they all looked at Ling Shiqi in shock. First of all, 7th-level spiritual power was not a cabbage on the roadside. Even among the people present, only those great masters in the oneness of heaven and men realm had 7th-level spiritual skills. But even in the oneness of heaven and men realm, none of them dared to say that they could use 4 7th-level spiritual skills at the same time. If the new chief of the Dark Thunder Guards had so many powerful spiritual skills when he was in the Gang spirit realm, it would be reasonable. After all, it was still possible to obtain 7th-level spiritual skills in a high position. But this strength made all the masters blush with shame. Wei Qi Yan was shocked by Ling Shiqi again. He also found that the opponent in front of him could always surprise him again and again. It had been like this since Ling Shiqi came to the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. The next moment, something that even surprised Ling Shiqi himself happened. Because the 4 spiritual skills he used were actually a little out of his control. He had forcefully used the 4 great spiritual techniques in order to see how far he could go. However, he had already used them, so how could he lose control? In the air, the firebird flew and the water dragon roared. Strangely, the wind prison suddenly shrank and condensed into a pure white wind spirit tiger. As for the mountain in the sky, it disintegrated and reformed into an incomparably huge Xian tortoise. The firebird, the water dragon, the wind tiger, and the tortoise respectively emitted a radiance that made people not dare to look directly at them. They gathered together and a four spirits formation appeared between the sky and the earth. Suddenly, the sky and the earth shook. Wisps of primitive gray flowing light outlined the edge of the formation. Waves of origin power were emitted, and all the spiritual and original energy of heaven and earth within a radius of dozens of miles became chaotic. It affected the Thousand Illusion Sword Master, Lin Yuanliang, and the old man who were in the unity of heaven and man stage. The three of them subconsciously stopped. Although they were opponents, they had the same feeling at this moment. That was disbelief. Those who were in the celestial realm could not sense it, but the two of them clearly felt that Leng Shiqi had mobilized a power that even they could not comprehend. The power of the laws of heaven and earth. The four spirits formation rotated and enveloped Wei Qi. He suddenly felt a tearing force everywhere, as if it was going to tear him apart. The power of the four elements of earth, water, wind, and fire surrounded him, making it difficult for him to even breathe. Wei Qi made a prompt decision to burn his blood essence and spit out a blood sword. As soon as the blood sword appeared, there was a pulling force that merged his two 7th-level spiritual swords into it. The misty sword radiance flowed gently. He turned into a flowing light and instantly slashed out countless sword shadows. Wei Qi actually had some of the true essence of the Thousand Illusion Sword Codex. Unfortunately, in front of the power of the laws of heaven and earth, it was still too weak. Under the strangulation of the four spirits formation, Wei Qi was completely sealed. No matter how hard he tried to resist, he could not reverse the situation. In the end, the four spirits formation exploded, and more than half of the entire Thousand Illusion Sword sect collapsed. Everyone was in a panic, and no one knew how many unlucky people from the Thousand Illusory Sword sect were killed by the four spirits formation. Puff! Leng Shiqi suddenly spat out a large amount of blood, and traces of blood appeared on his 7 orifices. However, his eyes were unusually bright, and there was a hint of surprise. However, his expression immediately became serious again, because he did not absorb Wei Qian's soul. That meant Wei Qi was not dead. Rolling his eyes, Leng Shiqi found that Wei Qian's body had fallen straight to the ground. His vitality was like a candle in the wind that could disappear at any time, but there was a faint sword shadow protecting his last trace of life. That should be his life-saving trump card, Leng Shiqi guessed. Wei Qi was the head of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, so it was normal for him to have some life-saving trump cards. As long as he forced out this trump card, others could easily kill Wei Qi without having to do it himself. Chapter 704. High up in the sky, Lin Yuanliang's body glowed with spiritual light. His blood rose and the origin energy of the heavens and earth surged. A golden-armored shadow of the mad god walked out from behind him. He punched out and the shadow of the mad god trembled strangely. The surrounding void space was distorted and the frightening fist strength was directed towards the Thousand Illusion Swordmaster. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster immediately took out the inherited sword of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, the Thousand Illusions Sword. In terms of grade, this sword was a level 8 earth weapon. A level 8 spiritual weapon was called an earth weapon. Unlike a level 7 treasure weapon which only had a certain level of spirituality, a level 8 earth weapon had already formed a weapon spirit. The weapon spirit was connected to the sword wielder and could be more compatible with the heavens and earth. It could greatly enhance the unity of heaven and man and divine origin stage cultivators. However, the rarity of a level 8 earth weapon was comparable to that of a divine origin stage cultivator. From a certain perspective, there were even fewer level 8 earth weapons than divine origin stage cultivators. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's sword could split mountains and rivers. The magnificent sword shadow was about to split the sky into two and also shattered Lin Yuanliang's fist strength. However, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's heart trembled. He did not know why, but he suddenly felt a strong sense of danger. He was in the divine origin stage and had been through many battles. He naturally had a sense of danger. At this moment, a thunderous roar could be heard from the 9 heavens. Dark clouds gathered and thunder rumbled. The origin energy of the heavens and earth trembled. The heavenly thunder of divine punishment, vanquish demons and slay Buddhas. A sloppy figure bathed in the heavenly thunder of divine lightning appeared. He looked like a thunder god descending. He was the Imperial Hall of Consecration Master who had been hiding for a long time, the old man. Those from the Thousand Illusions Sword sect who did not know what was going on were shocked. There was another divine origin stage cultivator. The Thousand Illusions Sword Master and Wei Qi-yen revealed a look of despair. Temporarily blocking Lin Yuanliang was already the Thousand Illusions Sword Master's limit. How could he block another divine origin stage cultivator? As the heavenly thunder descended, the Thousand Illusions Sword Master's white hair swayed without wind. He condensed his sword fingers and an illusion formation was formed. The illusion formation ignored the thunderbolts and enveloped the old man. The old man tilted his head and said, "Old thing, your illusion technique is not bad, but I'm also a spirit caster. This little bit of illusion technique can't do anything to me." Then, he snapped his fingers lightly, and a layer of light purple lightning sprinkled down, protecting himself. At the same time, the destructive holy thunder struck. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's magic treasure sword shook and 3 sword projections appeared in the sky. As the sword shadows trembled, they ignored the sword chi and blocked most of the divine thunder. But at this moment, Lin Yuanliang also made his move. He blasted out another punch. What was different was that this punch actually carried the aura of a powerful army, and it transformed into numerous brave and ferocious knights that charged forward. Peng peng peng. Under the combination of the holy thunder and the fist, the 3 sword shadows were in imminent danger. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's face also turned red. He had also reached his limit. On the other side, Wei Qi-yen, who was already on the verge of death, suddenly opened his mouth and said something. But no one else heard his voice. Only the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster lowered his head and looked at him. His eyes were filled with reluctance and hope. Seeing that his 3 sword shadows were about to collapse, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster seemed to have made a very difficult decision. Then, he slapped his forehead and a mini person flew out from the top of his head. That was his immortal soul. The immortal soul of the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster swayed slightly and actually entered Wei Qian's body. Wei Qian's body started to float mysteriously, and the blood-red sword shadow that enveloped his body also shrunk back into his body. Waves of frightening aura spread out, and even Lin Yuanliang and the old man's faces were filled with seriousness. Leng Shiqi's supercilious eyes also flashed with a strange look. Through his supercilious eyes, he could clearly see that Wei Qian's spiritual aura had completely changed. It had become the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster. They actually used some kind of secret method to allow the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster to obtain Wei Qian's body. In Leng Shiqi's words, it was possession. Furthermore, it was Yu Qi-yen who wanted the Thousand Illusionary Swordmaster to possess his body. His body would not feel any discomfort, and the techniques that they cultivated were the same. This meant that the Thousand Illusionary Swordmaster had a young body. The biggest weakness of the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster was his age. In fact, in theory, a Tianyuan cultivator could live for 300 to 400 years. But that was only in theory. After all, even among Tianyuan cultivators, it was difficult to avoid fighting. Once injured, it would more or less affect one's lifespan. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's chi and blood had long deteriorated, and his strength was probably less than half of his peak. That was why it was so difficult for him to face Lin Yuanliang and the old man together. Otherwise, with his strength, it was not impossible for him to fight 1 against 2. Now that he had obtained a young body, his strength had almost recovered to its peak state. Of course, he also had a very big disadvantage. That was, Wei Qian's cultivation was only at the unity of heaven and man level. In terms of spiritual power, it was far from the Tianyuan cultivator. However, for a battle between Tianyuan cultivators, spiritual power was not the most important thing. Mastery of the origin energy of heaven and earth was the most important. Wei Qiyan, or rather, the Thousand Illusions Sword Master, stood in the air, holding the Thousand Illusions sword in his hand. His eyes flashed with a fierce light that looked down on the world. It's been too long. I haven't felt this powerful for too long. The Thousand Illusions Sword Master murmured, Lin Yuanliang, the old man, today, let me see what you two juniors are capable of. He held his sword across his chest and did not attack. However, everyone present felt the boundless sword essence. It was as if everything in the world had become a sword. Hiss. The old man said in surprise, this old thing has actually touched the edge of the laws of heaven and earth. If he is given a few more decades, he may really break through to that level. Lin Yuanliang's expression was also very serious. It seems that this mission is not as easy as I thought. Humph, what era is it now? You still dare to look down on juniors. Today, I will show you that today's world no longer belongs to you. Lin Yuanliang's body flashed with a dazzling golden light. He flashed and flew to the forehead of the golden-armored mad god behind him. The two merged into one. The patterns on the mad god's body became clearer. Every strand of hair and pores grew out. It had completely turned into a living god. Crash! At the same time, the old man waved his hand and a purple lightning flashed across the void. The faint roar of a giant beast came from the 9 heavens thunder clouds. A terrifyingly huge thunder beast poked out of the thunder clouds. It opened its mouth and a thunder-light pillar that was hundreds of feet thick gushed out. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's expression did not change. Let me show you the true power of the Thousand Illusions Sword Codex. Chapter 705. The Thousand Illusion Sword Elder's Thousand Illusion Dao swords suddenly disappeared. At the same time, there were thousands of Dao sword shadows suspended in midair. It looked like a sword formation. He formed a seal with his hands and a dreamy bubble wrapped around the sword shadows and connected them together. After the formation was formed, countless sword hums resounded for hundreds of miles. Anyone who heard the sword hums felt their vision turn black as countless illusions entered their minds. Only the disciples of the Thousand Illusion Sword Elder were not affected too much. Some of the spirit casters on Leng Shiqi's side hurriedly set up an isolation array to prevent too many casualties. Within the sword formation, countless sword threads intertwined and shot out. Those sword silks were split into two, and one of them shot into the sky. Those seemingly weak sword silks easily broke through the layers of lightning, and in the blink of an eye, they pierced through the body of the lightning beast, creating bloody holes. The other half of the sword silks shot towards Lin Yuanliang. Lin Yuanliang used the mad god's body to press down 3 fist seals. The first seal shattered mountains and rivers, the second seal shattered mountains and tsunamis, and the third seal shattered the heavens and earth. The entire mountain range was constantly shaking, and the spirit cultivators who were still fighting had already retreated far away. Leng Shiqi also retreated. The power of the 3 sky origin stage experts fighting in the sky was too terrifying. If he got any closer, he would be implicated and die without a burial ground. However, Leng Shiqi also watched their battle without blinking. After all, there were very few opportunities to see a life and death battle between Sky Origin stage experts. As long as he could see a little bit of the trick, he would benefit a lot. Other than that, he was also looking for an opportunity to see if he had the chance to interfere. Facing Lin Yuanliang's fist seal that shook the void, the Thousand Illusion Sword Elder's seal changed. Those sword silks instantly condensed into a huge sword. One sword to break 3 seals. At this time, the old man's lightning beast was strangely shrinking. The smaller it became, the denser the lightning on its body became. In the end, the huge beast that was supporting the sky condensed into a spear blade that flickered with endless lightning. The old man swung his spear downwards, and the blinding lightning was so bright that no one dared to look at it directly. In an instant, a large patch of sword silk was sliced apart, and the remaining power was directed at the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster. You do have some skills. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's expression was still very calm, as if he was guiding a junior. The sword wheel around him shot up into the sky, and all the sword shadows in the sword matrix flowed out like dragons soaring into the sky. This part of the sky shattered inch by inch, looking like a broken spider web. Lin Yuanliang and the old man were shocked. They did not expect the Thousand Illusions Sword Elder to be so powerful. There were very few people in the Heavenly Yuan stage who could kill him. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster swept his gaze across Ling Shiqi. Following which, tens of sword silks shot towards Ling Shiqi. He also knew that today's disaster was all caused by Ling Shiqi, and this boy must die. However, Ling Shiqi did something that no one expected. He did not dodge, and instead, he jumped up and rushed forward. Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei immediately shouted, "Sir, what are you doing? Be careful." The old man also shouted. He did not want the new member of the elite hall to die like this. The others did not understand why Ling Shiqi did this. How could he, a person in the gang spirit realm, take on a battle between Heavenly Yuan stage masters? If he did not escape at this time, he might have a chance to survive under the protection of so many masters. Not only did he not escape, but he also rushed forward. This action was undoubtedly seeking death. The disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect sneered. Today's disaster was caused by Ling Shiqi, and they could not wait for Ling Shiqi to be smashed into pieces. Of course, Ling Shiqi would not court death. He observed the battle between the three Heavenly Yuan stage masters and could see that the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster had the upper hand in the situation of 1 against 2. He was not too worried about the old man and Lin Yuanliang. The two of them had not shown their trump cards yet, but the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster had. However, if they continued to fight like this, even if they won in the end, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. In particular, if the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster was really forced into a desperate situation, he might go crazy and kill Ling Shiqi and the other masters in the gang spirit realm and Oneness of Heaven and Men stage to be his scapegoat. Originally, he was still looking for an opportunity to attack. Now that the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster attacked first, it naturally gave him a chance. It was a chance to end this battle as quickly as possible. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster also showed a trace of surprise when he saw Ling Shiqi rushing over. However, he did not feel disdain. Instead, he felt puzzled and surprised. In his opinion, the 4 great chiefs were not idiots who would court death. This person must have his own guard of honor. Immediately, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster frowned. This was because Ling Shiqi was not penetrated by the sword silk. Instead, he passed through it directly. Unless one was a master in the Heavenly Yuan stage, no one could pass through the sword formation and sword silk so easily. How could Ling Shiqi, who was only in the gang spirit realm, do it? In reality, no one noticed that Ling Shiqi was holding a sword in his hand. To be more precise, it was a faint sword shadow. As a sword cultivator, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster immediately felt that something was wrong. He stared at the faint sword shadow and frowned. As a swordsman, he felt an indescribable power from the sword shadow. It was a power that could kill him. The 4 wings on Ling Shiqi's back flapped and he turned into a 5-colored ray of light and rushed towards the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster. In the eyes of others, he was simply courting death. However, the strange thing was that the powerful sword formation that defeated the 2 Heavenly Yuan stage cultivators suddenly twisted and disappeared. Lin Yuanliang and the old man were shocked. They knew how powerful the sword formation was. How could it be destroyed in an instant by a gang spirit realm cultivator? What made them even more incredulous was that Ling Shiqi was wielding a sword-shaped shadow as he stabbed towards the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster. However, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster did not react at all, regardless of whether he was forming hand seals or waving his Taoist sword. From afar, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster was like an actor on a stage. It was a little comical. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster was also stunned. At this moment, he could not even mobilize his own spiritual energy, let alone the chi of heaven and earth. Soon after, his body, which was floating in the air, fell to the ground uncontrollably. Leng Shiqi's sword was already in front of him. The Thousand Illusions Sword Master had lived for hundreds of years. What had he not seen before? However, at this moment, he started to panic. In his panic, he could only use the Thousand Illusions sword to block in front of him. He wanted to use the power of the level 8 earth weapon to stop Leng Shiqi. However, with a clang, the Thousand Illusion Dao sword in his hand was instantly knocked away, and the sword-shaped phantom pierced through his heart. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster looked at the hole in his chest in a daze. He could not believe that he would die so mysteriously. He could not believe that he would die in the hands of a gang spirit realm cultivator. Of course, he was more desperate. Once he died, the Thousand Illusions Sword sect would be destroyed. Pfft, the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster's body fell from 1,000 feet high. Without the support of any spiritual energy, his body was smashed into meat paste. The Thousand Illusions Swordmaster, who had protected the Thousand Illusions Sword sect for hundreds of years, had fallen. On the battlefield, which was filled with tens of thousands of people, not a single sound could be heard. Everyone was staring at Leng Shiqi, including Lin Yuanliang, the old man, and the heavenly Yuan stage practitioner. Leng Shiqi stood in the air. He used the passive skill, Hell's Curse, to absorb the remnant soul of the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster. The soul power of a Tianyuan stage cultivator instantly restored his spiritual energy and broke through the barrier to level 8 of the gang's spirit realm. At the same time, the souls of the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster and Wei Qiyan were also kept in the Mansion of the Dead. Leng Shiqi was also looking forward to seeing what was special about the souls of Tianyuan stage cultivators. The reason why he dared to mess things up and killed the Thousand Illusions Swordmaster so easily was because of one thing. Divine Sword, Bright. Chapter 706. The Divine Sword Clear Light could cut off all the spiritual energy in the world. In front of this sword, anyone was no different from an ordinary person. This included the Sky Origin stage experts. It was a pity that the Divine Sword Clear Radiant that Leng Shiqi had obtained was a one-time consumable item. Otherwise, he would have felt invincible. However, after using the Divine Sword Clear Radiant once, he had an indescribable strange feeling in his heart. He wanted to immediately go into seclusion to comprehend it, so he immediately shouted, "Leave no one alive." Only then did everyone finally react. They suppressed the shock in their hearts and charged towards the disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. The remaining disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect had no fighting spirit and were in a mess. Under the encirclement of many experts, they suffered heavy casualties. This was not to say that the disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect were too useless. It was just that after Wei Qiyan and the Thousand Illusions Sword Elder, their two strongest backers, fell, they could no longer see any hope. Not to mention the many experts of the Dark Thunder Guards, there were two Sky Origin stage experts, Lin Yuanliang and the Old Man in the Sky. There was also Leng Shiqi, who could be said to be abnormal. All the disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect had lost any fighting spirit. The old man's eyes moved and a shocking thunder fell from the 9 heavens. In the blink of an eye, the few remaining experts of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect who were at the Unity of Heaven and Man stage were killed. Then, he and Lin Yuanliang did not make any more moves. With their identity and status, killing someone at the Unity of Heaven and Man stage was already lowering their status. If they were asked to go down and kill those disciples at the Spirit Astral Realm and Spirit Aperture Realm, it would be embarrassing. However, there was indeed no need for them to make a move. Even Leng Shiqi did not make a move, because the situation had been decided. He spread out his colorful wings and hovered in the sky above the battlefield. It seemed like he was preventing any fish from escaping, but in fact, he was constantly absorbing a large amount of soul power. There were tens of thousands of disciples of the Thousand Illusions Sword sect. Among them, there were many spirit cultivators at the 4 realms of heaven and man. Just the remnant soul power alone increased Lin Shiqi's spiritual power and physical strength by a large amount. At the same time, a large number of souls were absorbed into the underworld. In just an hour, the Thousand Illusory Sword sect, one of the top sects in the Ba Huang army, had been reduced to a pile of crimson ruins. Holding a bracelet and a ring, Yan Ming walked to Lin Shiqi. "Sir, this is the storage space of the Thousand Illusions Sword Sect Master Wei Qi Yan and Grand Elder Thousand Illusions Sword Venerable. Is this a storage ring?" Lin Shiqi picked up the light-colored ring. This storage ring was the rarest and most precious of all the storage rings. The space inside a storage ring was very large, enough to match 10 storage bracelets. Moreover, it was more flexible, and it was usually engraved with formations. It was a priceless treasure. Anyway, this was the first storage ring that Lin Shiqi had seen. He took the bracelet and ring without hesitation. Then, he shouted, "All the resources of the Thousand Illusionary Swords sect will be divided equally." As soon as these words were spoken, the crowd burst into cheers. These people were all from the Dark Thunder Guards, the Discipline Commission, and the military. However, these three places were extremely strict. It was not easy to profit from them. The Thousand Illusionary Swords sect was a top sect that had stood tall for hundreds of years. The resources it had accumulated were definitely huge. Even if everyone divided them equally, they would still be able to get a lot of good things. Generally speaking, most of the resources seized after destroying a force would fall into the hands of the top few people. The rest would be divided among the subordinates, and there would not be much left. Therefore, Lin Shiqi's generosity made everyone have a good impression of him. In addition, in the process of attacking the Thousand Illusions Sword sect, he first used a trick to gather all the disciples and secretly destroyed the Thousand Illusions 9 Pavilions sword formation. In the end, he seriously injured the sect master Wei Qi Yan and killed the Thousand Illusions Sword Venerable by himself. Regardless of whether it was his strength or his bearing, they were all admirable. Unknowingly, Lin Shiqi's prestige among these people had reached a peak. Wu Yi was even more envious in his heart. In fact, to Lin Shiqi, what he lacked the most was not those resources. He only needed to obtain the things of Wei Qi Yan and the Thousand Illusionary Sword Venerable. In particular, the complete Thousand Illusionary Sword Codex inside made him extremely envious. Seeing that Yan Ming had offered up the treasure, Deng Xinlei walked over with a long sword in his hand. One could see that the sword was still trembling violently in his hand. If it were not for Deng Xinlei forcefully suppressing it, the spiritual sword would have probably broken free. A sword that could be suppressed by an expert of the unity of heaven and man stage with all his strength was the most precious treasure of the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect, the rank 8 earth weapon, the Thousand Illusions Sword. "Sir, a treasured sword is a gift to a hero. I believe that you are the true owner of this sword." Deng Xinlei had been completely subdued by Lin Shiqi. From his methods to his strength, he was far inferior to him, so he naturally began to fawn over him. Lin Shiqi raised his eyebrows, and his eyes could not help but reveal a few wisps of light. He already had a lot of high-grade spiritual weapons on him, especially in Li Jueqing's storage bracelet where he found several rank 7 precious weapons, but he had never owned a rank 8 earth weapon. Not to mention the Gang Spirit Realm and the Unity of Heaven and Man stage, even the Tianyuan stage experts did not have a rank 8 earth weapon. Lin Shiqi reached out to hold the Thousand Illusionary Sword, and the sword immediately buzzed, causing his hand to go numb. Humph! Lin Shiqi snorted softly, and his palm instantly turned into the color of diamond. Majestic mental strength surged, and at the same time, he operated the Thousand Illusionary Sword Codex in his body, finally making the Thousand Illusionary Sword Codex settle down. With this Thousand Illusionary Sword, it was equivalent to letting his strength soar out of thin air. Now, even if it was an expert at the middle stage of the Unity of Heaven and Man stage, he was confident that he could kill him within a few moves. As for the late stage of the Unity of Heaven and Man stage, he might be able to hold on for a while. This was not because Lin Shiqi was arrogant, but because he had accidentally comprehended the four spirits formation after mastering the 16 Heaven Changes True solution, and had a rank 8 earth weapon in his hand. Ordinary experts at the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man stage were no match for him. At this time, Lin Yuanliang and the old man, two experts of the Tianyuan stage, came over with strange expressions. They stood on both sides of Lin Shiqi and did not speak. They just stared at Lin Shiqi. Lin Shiqi was numbed by their stares. He put away the 1,000 illusionary sword, cupped his fists, and said, "Seniors, what are you doing?" Lin Yuanliang and the old man looked at each other and shouted to the East Town Thunder Flame Army, "Listen up, gather the resources and return to Donglin County in formation." "Yes, sir." Then he said to Lin Shiqi, "There are some things that are inconvenient to say. Anyway, the 1,000 illusionary swords sect has been destroyed. Let them deal with the follow-up matters themselves. Come with us." Lin Shiqi more or less guessed their intention. It was nothing more than the way he killed the 1,000 illusionary sword master was too strange. Fortunately, he had already thought of an excuse to deal with it. So the three of them immediately left and soon came to the dense forest dozens of miles away. Chapter 707. After Lin Shiqi, Lin Yuanliang and the old man landed on the ground, the old man waved his hand and set up a thunder formation. Then he asked seriously, "How did you kill the 1,000 illusion sword master?" Lin Yuanliang's eyes were also shining. When Lin Shiqi used the four spirits formation, he had activated the power of the laws of heaven and earth. This was enough to shock them. But when Lin Shiqi killed the 1,000 illusion sword master, even they, who were in the Tianyuan stage, could not figure out what had happened. Lin Shiqi was very clear that the biggest reason was the divine sword Xiaoming. The divine sword Xiaoming definitely contained the power of the laws of heaven and earth. But what was special was that it did not belong to this world. In Lin Shiqi's original understanding, he could only understand the power of the laws of this world in this world. But the divine sword Xiaoming also broke his idea. At the same time, it also pointed out a wider cultivation path for him. Because he had the system, he had many opportunities to come into contact with the power of the laws of other worlds. Facing the old man's question, Lin Shiqi answered, "Actually, I don't know. I got a sword by chance. To be more precise, it was a sword shadow." Sword shadow. The old man did not understand. Yes, it was a sword without a physical body. In front of this sword, everyone is just an ordinary person. That's why I was able to kill the 1,000 illusion sword master. Lin Shiqi said with a mixture of truth and falsehood. The old man and Lin Yuanliang were silent. They saw the 1,000 illusion sword master being killed by Lin Shiqi with their own eyes. Even a Tianyuan stage cultivator could be turned into an ordinary person. What kind of power was this? Even the power of the laws of heaven and earth might not be able to do this. Now Lin Shiqi was like a fog in their eyes. They could not see through him. Not to mention the sword shadow, just the fact that he could activate the power of the laws of heaven and earth in the gang spirit realm made them feel inferior. The power of the laws of heaven and earth was what all Tianyuan stage cultivators yearned for. Unfortunately, the energy of the laws was illusory and intangible. It couldn't be seen or touched, and it couldn't be taught by word of mouth. One could only rely on oneself to comprehend it. Therefore, most of the sky origin stage cultivators had never even touched the surface of the natural laws. All they could do was try their best to control as much natural powers as possible. The origin energy of heaven and earth was indeed powerful, but in this world, one could only be considered as a relatively powerful contestant. Only those who had grasped the power of the laws of heaven and earth could be called the rule maker. This was just like Lin Shiqi's Dark Thunder Guard. Only the four great managers were the real higher-ups and could change the rules of the Dark Thunder Guard. Below them, even the deputy general manager was only a person carrying out a mission. Lin Shiqi's cultivation was still in the gang spirit realm, not even in the oneness of heaven and men realm, but he had crossed two big realms and got in touch with the law of heaven and earth, which made the old man and Lin Yuanliang feel that their years of cultivation were in vain. However, they didn't have any bad intentions. First of all, Lin Shiqi was one of the four chiefs of the Dark Thunder Guards. Moreover, the power of the laws was yours once you comprehended it. No one could take it away from you even if they wanted to. The old man said in an envious tone, your luck and perception can be said to be heaven-defying. In some aspects, you have already surpassed us. Lin Yuanliang also said, your cultivation is actually not so important. The oneness of heaven and men realm requires you to communicate with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but you have already left this level. As long as your spiritual energy reaches a certain level, it will be easy for you to break through the oneness of heaven and men realm. Even the sky origin stage won't be much of an obstacle for you. In fact, Leng Shiqi himself didn't know that his cultivation had been so smooth. He said politely, I'm just lucky. Maybe you are lucky, but in my opinion, you seem to have a lot of luck. The old man shook his head a few times, as if what he said was reasonable. Lin Yuanliang, on the other hand, nodded seriously. Luck. Leng Shiqi began to ponder. He had seen a lot of luck. In the beginning, he and Nine Leaf worked together to get the Wind Thunder God's luck stone from the Wind Thunder Tower in the West Barren State. It was said that there was a sliver of luck in it, but he didn't know if he absorbed it. Later, he entered the Dragon Fountain to cultivate for 10 days. There was definitely luck in there. Also, when he was in the Tuoba country, he absorbed some golden power from Tuoba forefather. Perhaps it had something to do with luck. Leng Shiqi also went to learn about luck. Luck was actually a bit similar to luck. As long as you had luck, you would encounter good things wherever you went. The difference was that when you had a lot of luck, you would soar into the sky. Whether it was conquering the world or pursuing the heavenly path, it would be smooth sailing. Leng Shiqi thought about what had happened to him recently and felt that the old man was right. Especially in the Void Scar Sky, his inky jade sword was the key to the Yunlu Demon Palace. He also got the Heavenly Thunderfire bead there. From then on, he set up a plan to rob the Heavenly Thunderfire bead, which attracted Lei Qingjuan's attention. In the end, he was conferred the title of one of the 4 general managers. Not only that, he also killed all the people who wanted to kill him in the Yunlu Demon Palace. Although Leng Shiqi's strategy and strength were the key to all this, he couldn't do anything about it. Therefore, he also felt that he might have some luck. As for the Heavenly Thunderfire bead that he copied, it did have a lot of formations. He couldn't see through it at all, so he could only keep it as a collection. Lin Yuanliang suddenly took out a small translucent bottle and threw it over. This is the 1,000-year-old black snake saliva. Each drop contains a lot of pure spiritual power, enough for you to use until the peak of Gang's spirit realm. Leng Shiqi subconsciously wanted to refuse. As the saying went, one should not accept a reward without pains. He was not familiar with Lin Yuanliang and had no relationship with him, so he couldn't take it. Lin Yuanliang said directly, you have endless potential. If you don't die halfway, you will be above me in the future. Just take it as a good karma. General Lin, you are so straightforward. I will take it. Lin Yuanliang's straightforward words made Leng Shiqi feel at ease and accept the 1,000-year-old black snake saliva. He really wanted it. The old man rolled his eyes. General Lin, you are so rich. I can only do you a favor. When we return to the imperial capital, I will take you to see the masters of the Imperial Hall of Worship. It was not a real thing, but it was far more valuable than the 1,000-year-old black snake saliva. The masters of the Imperial Hall of Worship were all masters of Tianyuan realm. Getting to know a few of them, even if it was just a little bit of affinity, would be a great benefit. Especially for people like Leng Shiqi, who mingled in the power of the imperial capital. If he had some connection with those masters, he would be feared by many. He also knew that the reason why the 2 masters in front of him gave him face was that they thought highly of his potential and future. He immediately cupped his hands and said, Seniors, if you need me in the future, just let me know. Chapter 708. After exchanging some pleasantries, the 3 of them parted ways. Lin Yuanliang led the Eastern Thunder Flame Army back to Donglin County, while the old man returned to the imperial capital alone. When the 2 of them were far away, a charming voice sounded, You still dare to come out with 2 Sky Origin Realm cultivators. Aren't you afraid that they will search your soul? The one who spoke was Nine Leaf. She walked out of the void, and there was a faint ancient aura around her. What was different from before was that her hair had turned pure black, and there was no sign of a demon on her body. Apart from a pair of demonic purple eyes, she was clearly a beauty who could bring disaster to a country. She was right. This was what Lin Shiqi was worried about at first. However, it was because of Nine Leaf that he had the confidence to come here alone with two Sky Origin Realm cultivators. Although Nine Leaf's cultivation had not fully recovered, she had also obtained the inheritance of the underworld after being conferred the title of Ghost Emperor Yao Yi of the Northern Wastelands. Now, she had completely mastered the inheritance technique. Although Lin Shiqi had not seen her fight, he was sure that her strength was no less than Sky Origin Realm cultivators. She had not recovered to the 7th rank, but her strength was stronger than when she was at her peak. This was the strength of the underworld's inheritance. Thinking of the underworld, Lin Shiqi felt that it was time to upgrade it. Of course, now was not the time. He immediately thought of a plan and said, "With Senior Nine Leaf here, I naturally have nothing to worry about. Your mouth is getting sweeter and sweeter." But then again, the underworld's inheritance is indeed powerful, even more powerful than my memory inheritance. I don't know where you got this arcane realm. Nine Leaf continued, "Speaking of which, it's strange. Why is it that when I'm not by your side, you always have some strange things? For example, the sword you used to kill Thousand Illusion Sword Elder. Where did it come from? Don't talk about chance and coincidence. There are too many coincidences around you." Nine Leaf's question hit the nail on the head. This was also the reason why Lin Shiqi did not want to spend too much time with Nine Leaf. He had too many unknown things in the system that could not be explained at all. He could only stubbornly say, "It is indeed due to chance. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the ability to create this arcane realm." Heh. Nine Leaf curled his lips. "It's fine if you don't want to say it. In any case, we have a blood contract. As long as you don't harm me, it's fine." Junior wouldn't dare. "Oh right, you heard what that old man said just now. When I return to the Imperial City, I'll probably meet some experts from the Imperial family's Hall of Worship. Senior, if you keep hiding on me, I'm afraid it'll be inconvenient." "Oh, so you were waiting for me here." Nine Leaf instantly saw through Lin Shiqi's intentions, but she still said, "Anyway, I'm tired of staying in the capital, so I'm planning to go out for a walk. I plan to make a trip to the Northern Wei Empire, and I won't be back for a long time." Northern Wei Dynasty. When Lin Shiqi heard these words, he guessed what Nine Leaf was going to do. Back in the demonic Miasma mountain range, it was the people from the Imperial Beast Abode and the Blood Beast sect who came to capture her. In order to survive, she self-detonated her great demon body, which had just passed the tribulation, and her cultivation was destroyed. Now that Nine Leaf had obtained the legacy of Underworld, her strength was no weaker than before. Furthermore, she still had a lot of room for improvement. Once she completely recovered to a rank 7 great demon, her strength would skyrocket, so it was time for her to take revenge. The Imperial Beast Abode and the Blood Beast sect were both in the Northern Wei Empire. Lin Shiqi sighed inwardly. Nine Leaf wasn't going to relax as if she was just going for a stroll. At the same time, he was a little worried. The Imperial Beast Abode and the Blood Beast sect were both top sects, and they weren't like the Thousand Illusionary Sword sect, which had declined for decades. They were still at their peak. The Imperial Beast Abode had a total of 3 Beast Kings, and each of them was in the Sky Origin realm. In addition to the spirit beasts they raised, they were comparable to 5 or 6 Sky Origin realm cultivators. The Blood Beast sect's strength was similar to the Imperial Beast Abode's. How could it be easy to take revenge on these two top sects? Even if Nine Leaf had the strength of the Sky Origin realm, it was very likely that she would die. Lin Shiqi secretly opened the system store and exchanged a large amount of experience pills and advancement pills. "Senior Nine Leaf, you can take these things." Looking at these pills, Nine Leaf seemed to be stunned for a moment, and her heart inexplicably throbbed. She also knew that Ling Shiqi had already guessed what she was going to do. For a long time, she wouldn't be able to help Ling Shiqi. It could be said that these most precious pills were given to her by Ling Shiqi for free. The two of them had always existed in the form of a transaction. As a great demon, Nine Leaf naturally had her own pride. Although Ling Shiqi's potential and strength were quickly catching up to Nine Leaf, she still looked at Ling Shiqi as a junior. In her impression, Ling Shiqi was also a person who wouldn't do anything without benefits. At this moment, she couldn't help but feel suspicious. Nine Leaf frowned, then opened her mouth and spat out a purple light. I won't take these things for free. This wisp of demon energy contains 10% of my power, which is enough to save your life. If you die, I will lose some of my soul power. She added. After speaking, she turned into a purple light and disappeared into the horizon. Sigh. Ling Shiqi sighed faintly. He wasn't worried about anything else. With Nine Leaves' personality, she wouldn't openly barge into the Imperial Beast Abode or the Blood Beast sect. He sighed, but in reality, he was sighing for the two top sections. In the near future, they would probably have a headache. However, this wasn't something that Ling Shiqi needed to worry about. He was prepared to worry about his own matters first. After destroying the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, there were still many things that he needed to deal with. When he returned to the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, he first ordered everyone to take the resources back to their homes, but he had to stay alone for a while. Not long after, he came to a deep pool in the back of the mountain. A person appeared inside. It was Oziu, who had secretly destroyed the Thousand Illusion 9 Pavilion's sword formation. As soon as he came out, he directly asked, Brother Lu, you hid it from me. Oziu was naturally referring to the fact that Ling Shiqi had hidden his identity as one of the four chiefs from him, as well as the fact that he had joined forces with the Discipline Commission, the East Guarding Thunder Flame Army, and the Imperial Hall of Worship to destroy the Thousand Illusion Sword sect. Ling Shiqi smiled apologetically, Brother Ziyu, don't blame me. If I had said that from the beginning, you probably wouldn't have believed me at all. On the contrary, you would have thought that I was talking nonsense. Then, there would be no possibility of cooperation. He originally thought that Oziu would be more or less angry, but unexpectedly, Oziu said indifferently, it doesn't matter. The Thousand Illusion Sword sect has been destroyed. I didn't kill a single person, so it can be considered as repaying their kindness. The destruction of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect was equivalent to Oziu taking revenge. Then what do you plan to do after this, Brother Ziyu? Ling Shiqi asked. Oziu fell silent. He had been cultivating wholeheartedly for several years just to take revenge. Now that the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, a top sect, had been destroyed, he suddenly lost his goal and didn't know what to do. I don't know either. Let's just take a walk first. He sighed slightly. Ling Shiqi's expression changed. Brother Ziyu, why don't you make a trip to the Western Desolate Prefecture? There are some of my subordinates there that I need Brother Ziyu's help to take care of. Moreover, from Pinghui Prefecture to the Western Desolate Prefecture, you can almost cross the Thunder Flame Dynasty. Of course, I won't let Brother Ziyu work for nothing. Here is the complete Rank 8 cultivation technique, the Thousand Illusion Sword Scripture, and the first 3 levels of the 5 God Flowing Light technique. As he spoke, he took out 2 jade slips. Oziu pondered for a moment and also took out a jade slip. These are the first 3 levels of the Thousand Revolutions Illusory World technique. Ling Shiqi smiled lightly. It was done. Chapter 709. After Oziu left, Ling Shiqi entered the mansion of the dead with a thought. The first thing he did after entering was to find 7 souls. These were the experts of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, including the Thousand Illusion Sword Elder and Wei Qiyan. Ling Shiqi looked at the soul of the Thousand Illusion Sword Elder, which was obviously more solid than the others, and his expression was not so numb. He summoned the soul of the Thousand Illusion Sword Elder and prepared to turn him into a ghost slave. He was also very curious about what the soul of a Tianyuan realm expert would look like after being turned into a ghost slave, and how strong would it be. However, Ling Shiqi suddenly stopped. He thought that after the mansion of the dead was upgraded, the power of the ghost slave would also increase. Now that he had met the requirements to upgrade the mansion of the dead, he might as well wait for the upgrade to become a ghost slave. He came to the gate of the Fengdu city and saw the requirements to upgrade the mansion of the dead, the current level of the mansion of the dead, level 3. The requirements to upgrade the mansion of the dead, 1. Recruit 3 members of the mansion of the dead, March 3rd. 2. Collect 2 high-level souls, February 2nd. 3. 40,000 system coins. Ling Shiqi did not hesitate to exchange 40,000 system coins and chose to upgrade the mansion of the dead. Then he was pushed out of the mansion of the dead by a repulsive force. This time he was prepared in advance and was already waiting for the system prompt. The upgrade of the mansion of the dead will take 10 natural days. During the upgrade, the mansion system will not be available. 10 days. Ling Shiqi murmured. These 10 days would be his most uncertain time. Fortunately, the battle was over. He only needed to deal with some follow-up matters and then return to the imperial capital. There should be no more accidents. Then, he hid himself in the vicinity and began to consolidate his cultivation. After he absorbed the remnant souls of the 1,000 illusion sword elder and many experts, his cultivation also broke through to the 8th level of the spirit gang realm. Although he had a strong foundation, he had just broken through to the 7th level of the spirit gang realm not long ago. The gap in cultivation was too big, and he needed to consolidate it well. Ling Shiqi cultivated steadily for 3 days. He calculated that the people of the Dark Thunder Guards should have returned to Pinghui City. Then he instantly teleported to Pinghui City in a tricolored divine light. When he walked into the Dark Thunder Manor, everyone saluted him respectfully. Now, his name had been deeply imprinted in everyone's hearts. This name represented an unimaginable skill and strength. Wu Yi, Yan Ming, and Deng Xinlei came out with faces full of joy. At the same time, they knelt on the ground and shouted, "Greetings, my lord." The 3 of them were powerful cultivators in the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm, but when they fought with Yu Qiyan, they were beaten by Yu Qiyan to the point that they could not fight back. However, Mr. Liu, who was in Gang Spirit Realm, was able to severely injure Wei Qiyan. If Wei Qiyan hadn't had a life-saving trump card, he would have been killed on the spot. Not to mention Ling Shiqi's shocking feat of killing the 1,000 illusion swordmaster. Now, the 3 of them were completely in awe of Ling Shiqi. In these 3 days, the 1,000 illusionary sword sect, the Machine Pass City, the Bright Mirror Palace, and the 1,000 illusionary sword sect, had been annihilated in a thunderous manner. This had shaken the entire Falling Star continent. The replacement of the top sects had happened before, but this kind of thing might not happen for decades or even hundreds of years. After all the top sects had powerhouses in Tianyuan realm, but the number varied. However, it was too difficult to kill a powerhouse in Tianyuan realm. Even when facing a powerhouse like the 1,000 illusion swordmaster, the Thunder Fire dynasty had sent 2 powerhouses in their peak state to besiege him. This could be seen from this. In addition, each top sect had been passed down for at least 100 years. They had collected a huge amount of resources, had a deep foundation, and had all kinds of trump cards. If one wanted to annihilate a sect, he must have the strength to completely crush it. Looking at the ranking of sects in the world, except for the most mysterious Yin and Yang temples, the current 3 dynasties, and the semi-hidden 4 saints spiritual realm, it was extremely difficult for other sects to annihilate another top sect. Only a colossus like the Thunder Fire dynasty could annihilate 3 top sects at the same time. There were also dozens of top sects that suffered along with them. Now, on the Falling Star continent, from ordinary people to high officials and nobles, all admired the courage of the Thunder Fire dynasty. They also admired Lei Qingjuan's iron fist. The relationship between the empire and the spirit cultivator sects had always been the biggest headache for the 3 empires. Yet, Lei Qingjun had boldly and decisively annihilated dozens of peak and first-rate sections. This action had probably frightened all the spirit cultivator sects in the Thunderfire Empire. In fact, it was indeed so. If the Thunder Fire dynasty had annihilated a top sect, the other sects might feel that the Thunder Fire dynasty had gone overboard and might even secretly join hands to fight against the dynasty. However, Lei Qingjun did it all. This really scared all the sects out of their wits. They did not even have the slightest intention to resist. Instead, they all holed up, sealed their mountains, and went into seclusion. The entire Thunder Fire dynasty's sects instantly became well-behaved. Among them, Leng Shiqi's name spread throughout the Falling Star continent. It was simply too absurd for a late-stage spirit astral realm cultivator to kill a sky origin realm cultivator. Many people did not believe it and thought that the Thunder Fire dynasty deliberately made him famous. However, his reputation had indeed reached an unprecedented level. Now, the names that were mentioned the most in the Falling Star continent were Lei Qingjun and Lu Xingji. Leng Shiqi also guessed some of the reactions of the outside world. He said indifferently, "Get up. Have the follow-up matters of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect been arranged properly?" Wu Yi immediately replied, "Sir, don't worry. There are no more disciples of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect in this world. Right now, there are no more top sects in the Pinghui Prefecture. This is great news for the Dark Thunder Guards and the Discipline Commission. As long as we take advantage of this period of time to rope in those who should be roped in and suppress those who should be suppressed, this subordinate dares to guarantee that there will not be any major problems for the next few decades." Very good. However, do you remember this seat once asked who is in charge of the Pinghui Prefecture? Leng Shiqi asked this question for the third time. Wu Yi bowed and said, "Naturally, it's Sir Lu." He knew very well that the strength and potential of the Leng Shiqi in front of him could be said to be abnormal. Even though Manager Hai's qualifications were very high, he was also very old. Whether or not Manager Hai would be part of the Dark Thunder Guards in the future was still uncertain. However, with Leng Shiqi's age, he could at least continue to be one of the four great managers for a few more decades. It was even possible for him to become the commander of the Dark Thunder Guards. If he had to choose between Manager Hai and Leng Shiqi, Wu Yi would definitely choose Leng Shiqi without hesitation. Leng Shiqi nodded and smiled. "All right then. You will follow me back to the imperial capital to take over the position of imperial eunuch. As for Pinghui Prefecture, Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei will take care of it." Hearing this, Wu Yi, Yan Ming, and Deng Xinlei all had different thoughts. Wu Yi understood very well that Leng Shiqi's actions were nothing more than to let his people completely control Pinghui Prefecture. As for Wu Yi himself, entering the imperial capital to follow Leng Shiqi was also a good choice. The only thing that gave him a headache was that he didn't dare to meet Manager Hai. In addition, Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei were also very happy. They were imperial eunuch envoys themselves. Although their status was slightly higher than that of the patrol envoy, they were definitely inferior in terms of benefits. Now that they had temporarily taken over Pinghui Prefecture, it was because of Leng Shiqi's trust in them that they could take advantage of this opportunity to gain some benefits. Therefore, the three of them were very satisfied. Leng Shiqi did not waste any time. After arranging everything, he brought Wu Yi back to the imperial capital. Chapter 710. When Leng Shiqi walked out of the interdomain transfer array in the imperial capital, he stopped in his tracks. Behind him, Wu Yi opened his mouth and almost cried out in surprise. Because at this moment, several people were standing there to welcome them. They were the Dark Lightning Guard's four chiefs, Eunuch Gao, Steward Hai, Shintu Zhen, Grand Commander Heavenly Master He Yen, and an expert from the Imperial Hall of Worship, Old Man. These people were all great figures whose names shook a region. At this moment, they had actually come together to welcome Leng Shiqi. Old Man's voice suddenly entered Leng Shiqi's ears. "How is it, brother? This is quite a lineup, isn't it?" Hearing this, Leng Shiqi almost guessed it in his heart. It seemed that the old man had added fuel to the fire behind his back to support him. Old Man should know that Leng Shiqi was the weakest of the four chiefs. This time, he took advantage of Leng Shiqi's great achievements to welcome him. This was equivalent to the other three chiefs acknowledging Leng Shiqi's position. At the same time, they knew that Old Man, a sky origin expert, was on Ling Shiqi's side. Ling Shiqi transmitted his voice, "Thank you, brother." "Ha, no need to be so polite." Ling Shiqi then walked to Heavenly Master He Yan and cupped his fist, "Greetings, Grand Commander." Heavenly Master He Yan also looked at Ling Shiqi, "You are giving me more and more surprises. I look forward to seeing how far you can go in the future." This time, the Dark Lightning Guard has contributed greatly to the Thunderflame dynasty's annihilation of many sections. The Dark Lightning Hall has already set up a banquet for you. "Thank you, Grand Commander." At the banquet, the Dark Lightning Guard was clearly much more enthusiastic towards Ling Shiqi. It was completely different from the banquet when he was promoted to Grand Commander. Now, most people had acknowledged Ling Shiqi's identity as one of the 4 great chiefs. He now had the authority to supervise 4 provinces and counties, and his name was known throughout the region. After the wedding banquet, Ling Shiqi politely rejected all the people who wanted to make friends with him and immediately locked himself in the secret cultivation room. He had accidentally used the 4 spirits formation diagram when he was fighting with Wei Lian. That was when he used the spirit techniques of the 16 Heavens transformation mantra that represented the 4 elements of earth, water, wind, and fire. Ling Shiqi believed that even the Li family's ancestor, who created the 16 Heavens transformation mantra, had not been able to do this. The 4 spirits array diagram seemed to contain a power that he couldn't understand, and he needed to figure it out. He also obtained the supreme technique of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, the Thousand Illusion Sword scripture, which was very compatible with his Chaotic Blossom's bewildering eye. As long as he comprehended a part of it, he would be able to greatly increase the power of his Chaotic Blossom's bewildering eye. He had also exchanged for the Thousand Revolutions illusory world technique from Ozu. This was a technique that specialized in illusions, and it could also allow Ling Shiqi's mental strength to have more room to display. In addition, he had comprehended something after using the Divine Sword Clear Radiance. It just so happened that he could wait for the underworld to level up. It could be said that he had killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Therefore, when Ling Shiqi's reputation was at its peak, he chose to go into seclusion. In this way, not only did he not offend anyone, but the people of the Dark Thunder Guards admired him even more. A young man who was famous, powerful, had monstrous potential, and held a high position. To not be arrogant and impatient, and continue to cultivate in seclusion, this was the true pride of the heavens. Time passed very quickly, and 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. Ling Shiqi opened his eyes on time. A system message appeared in front of him. Territory level up successful. Ling Shiqi hurriedly entered the underworld with a hopeful look on his face. As soon as Ling Shiqi entered underworld, he immediately felt something different. He hadn't even looked around in detail, but all of the places within underworld appeared in his mind, each and every one of them existing in his heart. It was as if he was the master of this world. Ling Shiqi finally felt a little gratified, because this was the ability that the master of the underworld should have. After the upgrade, the underworld had a radius of 1,000 miles, and the mountains rose and fell one after another. The river of forgetfulness poured down like the water of the 9 heavens, and there was a huge blood moon in the sky that flickered, and there were tens of thousands of souls floating on the ground. It could be said that it had some resemblance to the 9 nether hell. The spirit energy here was also much more abundant, but this kind of spirit energy was more suitable for people who cultivated demonic arts. If other spirit cultivators cultivated here, it would be half the result with twice the effort. What he cared about the most was not the changes in the environment. With a thought, he instantly arrived in front of the gate of Fengdu City. And the gate that had been closed for a long time finally opened. Walking into Fengdu City, Ling Shiqi suddenly felt that this was not a city, but another heaven in this subworld. Because he was in Fengdu City, the feeling it gave him was completely different. If it was said to be gloomy below, then there was a sense of solemnity here. He looked up, and the most eye-catching things in Fengdu City were the huge and dark palaces. These were the 10 kings of hell. Among them, the palaces of King Qingguang, King Ping, and King Luan Zhuan all flickered with a faint light, and the others were incomparably dim. This meant that the three palaces already had their own masters, which were Yushu, Meng Ming, and Oziu. What surprised Leng Shiqi the most was that there were actually 6 whirlpools that almost covered the sky at the end of Fengdu City. That was the 6 paths of reincarnation. The 6 paths were divided into 3 good paths and 3 evil paths. The 3 good paths were the heavenly path, the human path, and the Azura path. The 3 evil paths were the hungry ghost path, the birth path, and the hell path. According to legend, after a person died, their soul would enter hell, and after a trial, their good and evil would enter different 6 paths of reincarnation. Then, since the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared in Leng Shiqi's underworld, did it mean that this place also had the ability to let people reincarnate? Leng Shiqi's eyes revealed a pondering expression. It was very simple to verify his thoughts. He turned around and went to the Palace of Lost Souls. There were already a large number of souls here, and after Fengdu City opened, they began to slowly walk into the city. Leng Shiqi followed all the way, and when the first soul that was about to be sent to the human path entered reincarnation, an extremely weak faint golden energy suddenly appeared and poured into Leng Shiqi's forehead. Strangely, he inexplicably knew that this was merit. As the saying goes, saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda, and Leng Shiqi sending people to reincarnation was even more meritorious. He still didn't know what the merit was for, but there was no harm in it. Then, Leng Shiqi opened the territory system to see if there were any changes. Sure enough, the number of ghost slaves he could have had already increased to 8. He might as well turn the 1,000 Illusions Swordmaster and the few Unity of Heaven realm experts of the 1,000 Illusions Sword sect into ghost slaves. What surprised him was that after the 1,000 Illusion Sword Elder turned into a ghost slave, he actually had the power of the union of heaven and man realm. Leng Shiqi thought about it and named him Sword Demon, and even gave him a 7th level spiritual sword. This was his strongest combat power. In addition, he also had an additional ability, the Netherlamp Phantom. He could contact the members of the underworld at any time in the underworld. This was not a 1,000-mile transmission, but he could use his identity as the master of the underworld to summon the members of the underworld to the underworld. Naturally, it was equivalent to face-to-face communication. This way, no matter where they were, he could directly contact them. It was really too convenient. Leng Shiqi was quite satisfied with the changes brought about by the underworld's upgrade this time. He immediately looked at the requirements for the next upgrade and began to prepare. Chapter 711. Underworld Territory Current Level, Rank 4. Underworld Territory Upgrade Requirements, 1. Recruit one of the 10 Kings of Hell, 0/1. 2. Collect 10 high-level souls, 0/10. 3. 80,000 system coins. The first thing that Leng Shiqi expected was the system coins. As expected, it doubled again. Fortunately, Leng Shiqi was rich now, so 80,000 system coins was not a problem. The number of high-level souls that needed to be collected had reached 10. If it was the Leng Shiqi in the past, it would have been difficult, but now, it was not a big deal. The key was that spirit cultivators in the unity of heaven and man realm were not very common. He could not go to a top sect to kill people. So these 10 high-level souls were quite troublesome. The most troublesome thing was the first condition. The mission this time was still to recruit members of Underworld, but it was no longer quantity, but quality. Among the members that Leng Shiqi had recruited in the past, except for Princess Carol who had not entered Underworld and received a title, the others were at least at the level of the 10 Kings of Hell. The first condition seemed simple, but among the people that Leng Shiqi was familiar with, the ones with the best talent and the highest comprehension had already been pulled into Underworld. Delta Origi, Yushu, and Meng Ming had all killed their way to Blood Fog Island together. Oziu was the most outstanding genius disciple of the top sect, 1,000 Illusionary Sword sect. As for Tu Dang and Jiu Li, there was no need to talk about them. However, other than these people, Leng Shiqi's list of candidates was only Di Chuan and Wu Diao. Although these two were the winners of the elite club, their talent was still lacking compared to Delta Origi and Leng Shiqi. Moreover, the the two of them were quite old, so they might not be able to receive a title from the 10 kings of hell. Zhuge Puha was very likely, but unfortunately, he was a descendant of the Star clan. Leng Shiqi did not trust the Zhuge family and the Star clan, so he would not easily accept Zhuge Puha. In this way, the scope of his recruitment had become very small. This matter could only be done slowly. It was likely that Underworld would not be able to upgrade in a short period of time. Since that was the case, Leng Shiqi wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to test the effects of the Netherlamp phantom body first. Then, he formed a seal with his hands and streams of netherworld energy flowed out. At this moment, Delta Origi, who was in the headquarters of the Discipline Commission, suddenly had a change in expression. In her mind, an inexplicable thought of being summoned appeared. She was very familiar with that aura. It was Leng Shiqi. Delta Origi's eyes moved, then closed them again. In an instant, her consciousness appeared in the underworld. At this time, she and Leng Shiqi were a little surprised because Delta Origi did not appear in its original form. In front of Leng Shiqi, a gigantic phantom that was dozens of feet tall suddenly appeared. This phantom was dressed in a ferocious blood-red robe and had a crescent moon mask on its head. Ghostly qi constantly emanated from it. Yuanyang Mingyue Ghost Emperor. What's going on? Delta Origi was puzzled. However, as soon as she opened her mouth, she found that even her voice had changed. That voice sent chills down one's spine, yet it also made one feel reverence. Leng Shiqi's eyes moved. So this was the Netherlamp phantom body. All members of the underworld who were summoned would appear in the form of a Dharma idol. This way, the identities of each member would be protected. Only Leng Shiqi knew everyone's true identity. Of course, if others were willing to reveal their identities, it would be understandable. It was all voluntary. Leng Shiqi said, "This is an ability I discovered in the underworld. We can use this method to contact each other at any time." Delta Origi understood. The underworld is indeed unfathomable. You are the same. At this point, Delta Origi took a deep look at Leng Shiqi. Half a month ago, she suddenly heard that Leng Shiqi had become the new 4 great chiefs. This shocked her. Now, Delta Origi was still having a headache fighting for the position of Deputy Punishment Envoy, but Leng Shiqi had directly become the 4 great chiefs. This huge gap made Gu Sen exclaim in amazement, but it was also hard for him to not be convinced. Fortunately, she had long known that Leng Shiqi was abnormal. After adjusting her mentality for 2 days, she felt better. However, a few days ago, she heard that Leng Shiqi had killed the Thousand Illusion Sword Sect Sky Origin Stage Expert, Thousand Illusion Sword Master. A Spirit Gang Realm Expert killing a Sky Origin Stage Expert. Delta Origi's first reaction was disbelief. However, reliable news from the Discipline Commission confirmed that this was indeed the case. This gave Delta Origi a great sense of defeat. Although she guessed that Leng Shiqi must have used some special method, in the end, he had killed a Sky Origin Stage Expert. This achievement was so terrifying that even Delta Origi felt a little discouraged. She was afraid that she would never be able to catch up to Leng Shiqi in this lifetime. Leng Shiqi continued to make seals. Not long after, the Dharma bodies of King Qingguang and King Pingdang also appeared. He summoned Yushu and Hengming. The two of them were also surprised when they arrived. Yushu even exclaimed, "Brother Leng, oh Brother Leng, I've heard of your great feats. TSK, 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 you are the 4 great chiefs of the Dark Thunder Guards. You even killed Thousand Illusion Sword Master. I really admire you. That's enough. I called you here to talk business." Leng Shiqi stopped Yushu from continuing. Yushu's tone became serious, "Go on, go on." Leng Shiqi's expression immediately became serious. "Now that I am the 4 great chiefs, I have the authority to supervise the 4 provinces. I can easily gather large amounts of resources. At the same time, I can make many arrangements in secret. Hengming, the Purgatory Demon sect you belong to is in Tianshan County. It is under my supervision. I will do my best to help you get to the top. If you need anything, just tell me directly. Hengming didn't answer. He only nodded silently. Then Leng Shiqi said to Delta Origi, the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards have some missions that need to be completed together. That is why we have a good relationship. When my foundation is more stable, I will be able to help you. I know. Delta Origi said simply. Yushu immediately became very envious. Leng Shiqi was now a moving money tree. It was a pity that the Extreme Blade Hall he belonged to was in the north of the Thunderblaze dynasty and didn't fall under Leng Shiqi's supervision. He couldn't get anything. Leng Shiqi naturally knew what Yushu was thinking. He waved his hand and took out dozens of jade slips. With a flick of his finger, these jade slips immediately emitted waves of light. Words flowed on the light screen. Seeing these words, Delta Origi and the others were delighted. This was because these jade slips recorded techniques and spiritual skills of rank 6 and above. These were things that Leng Shiqi had taken from Li Juecheng and Thousand Illusion Swordmaster. He picked out the ones that were most suitable for Delta Origi and the others. With these techniques and the legacy of the underworld, Leng Shiqi believed that their strength would increase greatly in a short period of time. Strength meant that they would be able to gain the favor of the upper echelons and accumulate more merits. From there, they would be able to climb up the ranks step by step. I hope that all of you can increase your strength as soon as possible. It is not for your respective factions or the Blood Garment Pavilion. It is for ourselves. Chapter 712. Delta Origi and the others did not stand on ceremony with Leng Shiqi. In fact, when they decided to join the underworld, they were already tied to Leng Shiqi. The four of them did not kill their way out of the Blood Mist Island to be the Blood Garment Pavilion's tools. They did not dare to betray the Blood Garment Pavilion, but at the very least, they had to leave a way out for themselves. Delta Origi memorized all the spiritual techniques that were suitable for her, then asked, now that you have made the fastest progress in the Blood Seed plan and have reached the true upper echelons of the Thunderblaze dynasty, I think the Blood Garment Pavilion will contact you soon. I have already thought of that. Leng Shiqi said, previously, Inkfrost Ghost Man always arranged for the Blood Garment Pavilion's people to be by my side at the most suitable time. Not only does he know my whereabouts like the back of his hand, but he also knows the various forces in the Imperial capital very well. I guess the Blood Garment Pavilion's Blood Seed plan is far more than just the four of us. Perhaps they had this plan a long time ago. In the Imperial capital, there are even people from the Blood Garment Pavilion in the Dark Thunder Guards and the Discipline Commission. The Blood Garment Pavilion has big plans. Next, they will definitely give me all the missions and use my identity to do things. Although this will be a little troublesome, it is also possible to find out the Blood Garment Pavilion's ultimate goal. Delta Origi said, it's good that you know it in your heart. That's all for today. You all should hurry up and cultivate. After Leng Shiqi reminded them, everyone dispersed. When Leng Shiqi returned to his secret room, he heard a commotion outside. He frowned and walked out. He saw that most of the experts under his command had gathered here. Deputy Manager Renyi, who was the leader, said in a deep voice, My lord, news just came from the palace. His Majesty is critically ill. I'm afraid he can't hold on. So fast. Leng Shiqi was very surprised. He had seen Lei Qingjun up close. With Lei Qingjun's physical condition, he seemed to be able to hold on for a year and a half. If those experts in the divine origin realm were willing to help, it would not be difficult to keep him alive for a while longer. Why was he suddenly critically ill? Not to mention that Lei Qingjun had just annihilated dozens of top-notch and first-rate sections. His reputation was unprecedentedly high. As the saying goes, when a person encounters a happy event, he would be in high spirits. He should be happy. However, Leng Shiqi suddenly thought that perhaps it was because Lei Qingjun had already done what he wanted to do the most and had no other worries in his heart. It could also be said that his body had been on the verge of collapse for a long time. It was only by relying on his willpower that he was able to hold on until now. The question Leng Shiqi was most concerned about was who the crown prince was. Seeing that Lei Qingjun was on the verge of death, it meant that the Thunderfire dynasty would soon have a new emperor. Leng Shiqi and the other important officials were naturally concerned about who the next emperor would be. After the incident with Air Scar Sky, the four most promising princes had their titles and authority stripped away. They were all placed under house arrest in their own mansions. On the other hand, the princes who had been chased away to their fiefdoms were summoned to the imperial capital. However, at that time, Leng Shiqi happened to be in Pinghui County. After he returned, he went into seclusion. Therefore, no one knew who had obtained the position of crown prince. Therefore, he asked, which prince is the current head of the Eastern Palace? Ren Ye's expression stiffened. He said, "Sir, you may not know, but the position of the Eastern Palace is still vacant." The position of crown prince is still vacant? Leng Shiqi could not understand. Since Lei Qingjun knew that he could not hold on any longer and had summoned the candidates to the imperial capital, why had the crown prince not been chosen yet? Lei Qingjun should know very well that if he died before appointing a crown prince, the Thunderfire dynasty would definitely fall into internal strife. Perhaps the stability that he had just established for the Thunderfire dynasty would be lost because of this. Leng Shiqi did not think that Lei Qingjun would be so stupid. He also did not think that Lei Qingjun would not have thought of this. Therefore, Leng Shiqi felt that Lei Qingjun had either not made up his mind or was plotting again. He was plotting with his own life. This was not impossible. Lei Qingjun had used his birthday banquet to set up layers of chess, including the entire Thunderfire dynasty and the various princes. What if Lei Qingjun had purposely spread the news that he was in critical condition? What was his goal? Ren Yi saw that Leng Shiqi did not speak, so he continued, "Not long ago, His Majesty summoned the slaughtering king, King Hui, and King An to the imperial capital, intending to choose one of the three to succeed the throne. However, forgive this subordinate for speaking bluntly. Among the three princes, King Hui is addicted to wine, King An is a martial arts fanatic, and the slaughtering king is a mediocre person. None of them can take on such a great responsibility. In comparison, the first prince, fourth prince, ninth prince, and 13th prince are all many times stronger than them. What a pity." Leng Shiqi also understood Ren Ye's meaning. In fact, Lei Haoyan and the others were all good candidates to succeed the throne. However, because they had colluded with the spirit cultivator sect, they were placed under house arrest by the furious Lei Qingjun. On the other hand, the slaughtering king Lei Haoga and the others were not capable. They were caught in a dilemma, so the position of crown prince was still vacant. Leng Shiqi didn't know much about King Hui and King An. If he had to choose a general among the dwarves, Lei Haoga had the highest chance. He had interacted with Lei Haoga for a period of time. The slaughtering king was not very bright, but at least he had some. Furthermore, he had never given up on Leng Shiqi. Just as they were talking, a eunuch hurried over and bowed. "Chief Steward Lu, His Majesty has summoned His Majesty to the palace." Leng Shiqi secretly transmitted to Ren Yi, "Withdraw all of your forces in case anything happens." This subordinate obeys. Following this, Leng Shiqi followed the eunuch into the palace. On the way, he met a few important officials of the imperial court. Looking at the situation, it seemed that Lei Qingjun's time really was running out. Leng Shiqi quickly entered the palace and waited in the main hall. He turned to look and saw that the Grand Commander, Heavenly Sovereign He Yen, Steward Hai, and Shintu Zhen had already arrived. In addition, the Grand Commander of the Discipline Commission and the 4 punishment envoys were all present. There were also many officials coming in. Only Eunuch Gao was not present. As His Majesty's personal attendant, he should be by Lei Qingjun's side. The officials were all whispering to each other, and the atmosphere in the hall was very heavy. After about an hour, just as everyone was getting anxious from waiting, the humble prince walked into the hall with heavy steps. Behind him were 3 dejected people. The slaughtering king Lei Haoga was one of them. Leng Shiqi guessed that the other 2 were probably King Hui and King An. Judging from their expressions, it seemed that neither of them had obtained the position of crown prince. He was even more confused as to what Lei Qingjun wanted to do. As soon as the humble prince appeared, the hall immediately quieted down. He stood at the front of the crowd, in other words, in front of the dragon throne. His Majesty has passed away. Chapter 713. Hearing the words passed away, the hall suddenly fell silent for a while. However, the sound of crying was immediately heard. The crying was truly heart-wrenching, as if their loved ones had died. The humble prince looked at all of this expressionlessly, because he had seen this scene dozens of years ago. It was almost the same as the one he had seen before. After a quarter of an hour, the middle-aged man standing at the head of the officials wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. "Your Highness, the country can't go a day without a ruler. I wonder which prince His Majesty appointed as the crown prince before his death. I will do my best to assist the new emperor and raise the prestige of the Thunderfire dynasty." The person who spoke was the current prime minister of the Thunderfire dynasty, Mo Linhui. When he asked this question, the crying in the grand hall stopped abruptly, and all the people looked at the humble prince. As officials, they were most concerned about who the new emperor would be. After all, the new emperor had his own officials. Whether they could continue standing here would be decided by the new emperor. However, the humble prince said something unbelievable. He said, "His Majesty only appointed half a crown prince." Half a crown prince? Leng Shiqi also felt that these four were very strange. The position of crown prince was not an object. If there was one, there was one. If there was no one, there was no one. What did he mean by only half a crown prince? In addition, perhaps once bitten, twice shy. He did not believe that Lei Qingjun was really dead. Everyone else was stunned. The humble prince continued, "His Majesty left a verbal order before he passed away. The slaughtering king, Lei Haoge, will temporarily enter the eastern palace but cannot inherit the throne. His Majesty gave the slaughtering king a year. During this year, the slaughtering king and I will govern together." Leng Shiqi finally understood. It turned out that Lei Qingjun had chosen the slaughtering king, Lei Haoge, out of the three of them. However, Lei Qingjun also knew that Lei Haoge was still not capable enough. He was still a bit worried and wanted to use a year to train him. Not to mention what contributions Lei Haoge could make. As long as he didn't cause any trouble within a year, the throne would be firmly in his grasp. Lei Haoge was also overjoyed. He obviously didn't know about this before and thought that Lei Qingjun didn't choose any of them. The officials, led by Mo Linhui, immediately knelt before Lei Haoge and said, "Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince. Long live Your Highness." Lei Haoge's face lit up with joy. "Everyone, please rise. Rise." Seeing this, the humble prince frowned slightly, but the frown disappeared immediately. In his opinion, Lei Haoge was too impatient. Lei Qingjun had just died, and he was already acting like an emperor. The civil and military officials did not care about this. The younger Lei Haoge was, the more incompetent he was. This was actually a good thing for them. If the emperor was too shrewd and far-sighted, they, as courtiers, would have to tread carefully as if they were walking on thin ice. But if it was the other way around, it would be completely different. Facing a useless ruler, they would naturally be able to use their power for personal gain. Rumble. Just as everyone stood up, a violent tremor came from the palace gates. All the powerhouses in the palace looked toward the palace gates at the same time, including Leng Shiqi. He did not need to activate his supercilious eyes to sense a powerful force of the oneness of heaven and men's state rushing toward them rapidly. That force contained horrifying flames and coldness. Only one person could have such a strange force, and that was the crown prince, Lei Haoyan. As expected, a human-shaped ferocious beast wrapped in purple flames broke through the imperial guards and rushed to the gate of the palace. Those courtiers who did not have high cultivation immediately ran behind Leng Shiqi and the others in a panic. The purple flames suddenly disappeared, and Lei Haoyan, who looked determined, appeared. At this moment, a dozen people appeared behind Lei Haoyan and surrounded him. All of them were in the oneness of heaven and men's state. Lei Haoyan looked directly at the humble prince and said in a deep voice, "I want to see my father." The humble prince closed his eyes and sighed slightly. "Lei Haoyan, do you know how serious a crime it is to break into the palace?" "I know." Lei Haoyan's voice suddenly became louder. "I also know that with my uncle and the powerhouses of the Imperial Hall of Worship here, I can't break through. Now, I just want to see my father again. I want to ask him face to face why I'm inferior to them." Lei Haoyan pointed at Lei Haoga and the other two. "If my father wants to pass the throne to Lei Haoran or Lei Haoyun, I have nothing to say. I also believe that they have the ability to rule the Thunderfire dynasty. However, if my father really gives the throne to these three good-for-nothings, I won't accept it." Hearing this, Lei Haoga, King Hui, and King An felt as if they had swallowed a fly. This was especially true for Lei Haoga, who had just become half the heir to the throne and was recognized by all the civil and military officials. Now, Lei Haoyan was pointing at him and calling him a good-for-nothing. He was so angry that he had already decided to tear Lei Haoyan into pieces after the registration. In fact, he also thought that whether it was Lei Haoyan, Lei Haoran, or Lei Haoyun, they were all very good. Any one of them was qualified for the throne. Unfortunately, they had violated Lei Qingjuan's taboo. "Haoyan, you know best why you lost your chance. Colluding with the spirit cultivator sects is your father's reverse scale, but you can't see through it. You can't blame others for this." His tone was much gentler. "Could it be that what my father did was right?" Lei Haoyan was still unconvinced. "We have always been hostile towards the spirit cultivator sections. The Discipline Commission is in the open, and the Dark Thunder Guards are always watching them. However, this is not the way to go. It will only make the enmity between us and the spirit cultivator sects grow deeper and deeper. Even if my father's heavenly might descended and destroyed many top sects and first-rate sects, shocking the world, those forces do not dare to resist in the slightest. However, all of this will only continue to expand the conflict. One day, this conflict will explode. The longer we suppress it, the more it will explode. At that time, the Thunderfire dynasty will only welcome the crazy counterattack of the spirit cultivator sections. If the Starfall dynasty and Northern Wei dynasty add insult to injury, the Thunderfire dynasty will be in danger. Right now, I just want to see my father and let him tell me in person that he wants to dethrone me. Otherwise, even if I die, I will not die in peace." He said so many words in a row, causing everyone to be stunned. However, immediately, many ministers began to refute him. They felt that Lei Haoyan was spouting nonsense and worrying for nothing. However, in Leng Shiqi's heart, he felt that Lei Haoyan's words made some sense. When Leng Shiqi was still a supervisor, he had already noticed this point. Those sects and families were very resentful towards the Discipline Commission and the Dark Thunder Guards. However, they did not dare to speak out because they were afraid of the Thunderfire dynasty's power. The emperor shook his head. "Perhaps you are right, but you are one step too late. Your father has already passed away and passed the throne to the slaughtering king, Lei Haoga." Lei Haoyan was immediately stunned. Chapter 714. Lei Haoyan's eyes widened and became bloodshot. He suddenly roared, "No, I don't believe it." It was unclear whether he didn't believe that Lei Qingjun had died just like that, or that Lei Haoga had taken the throne. He glared at Lei Haoga with his bloodshot eyes. The purple flames around his body flickered like a wild beast. Lei Haoga felt a chill run through his body as he was stared at by an enraged Unity of Heaven cultivator. He couldn't help but shiver. Lei Haoyan clenched his fists and gathered the fire spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The amethyst frost flame burned fiercely, activating all the arrays in the hall. "Lei Haoyan, what are you doing?" the shoddy prince roared. No one had ever dared to make a move in this hall. "Die!" Lei Haoyan turned into a stream of fire. The majestic purple flame seemed to want to devour everything. "You disappoint me too much." King Zhuozhen gently waved his hand, and the horrible purple flame was instantly extinguished. At the same time, a huge force slapped Lei Haoyan, sending him flying and crashing into the array in the hall. Lei Haoyan was covered in blood, but his bloodshot eyes were still staring at Lei Haoge. The first prince, Lei Haoyan, trespassed the palace and tried to harm the crown prince. He is stripped of his status and imprisoned for life. Take him away. The shoddy prince decided Lei Haoyan's fate with a single sentence. He had already shown mercy by not killing Lei Haoyan. Lei Haoyan was then dragged out. Lei Haoge sneered. At this moment, he also realized that he was no longer the same person as before. So what if Lei Haoyan was strong? Could he be stronger than the imperial guards and the imperial hall of worship? He was already imagining how he would torture Lei Haoyan in the future. Leng Shiqi shook his head as he watched Lei Haoyan being dragged away. In fact, Lei Haoyan shouldn't have come today. It didn't matter when Lei Qingjun died. If he had hidden himself and accumulated strength, he might have had a chance to turn the tables. However, he had nothing now and even offended Lei Haoge. He would die a horrible death sooner or later. Minister Mo, yes, Your Majesty. Mo Linhui cupped his hands. His Majesty has passed away. You should be in charge of the state funeral. Also, the slaughtering king, Lei Haoge, should be preparing for his coronation ceremony, but it's best to keep a low profile. Mo Linhui stole a glance at Lei Haoge. Seeing that he didn't seem to be dissatisfied, he immediately said, "Don't worry, Your Highness. This old subject will definitely make the appropriate arrangements. You have served 3 emperors, so I'm not worried. The crown prince will also need your advice." The humble king winked at Lei Haoge. Lei Haoge immediately stepped forward and said respectfully, "Minister Mo, please teach me." "Your Highness, this is what I should do." They kept calling him, "Your Highness the Crown Prince," which made Lei Haoge's heart burst with joy. When he thought about how he would be able to ascend to the throne in a year's time, he felt even more elated. Leng Shiqi could see this from Lei Haoge's expression. Since he could see it, the court officials were all sly old foxes. They probably didn't have a high opinion of Lei Haoge. After that, most of the officials returned to their homes. The rest had to arrange for the state funeral and the coronation ceremony as soon as possible. Leng Shiqi, Heavenly Lord He Yan, and the others returned to the Dark Thunder Guard headquarters together. Heavenly Lord He Yan sighed. His Majesty's death was a bit sudden. There are still some things that have not been properly arranged. In the year before the Crown Prince ascends to the throne, we cannot let our guard down. The Grand Commander is right. However, I'm afraid that some people won't put their minds on supervision and instead focus on fighting for power, Steward Hai said as he stroked his long beard. Leng Shiqi narrowed his eyes. He had taken back Pinghui Prefecture. This Steward Hai couldn't help but want to make things difficult for him. However, he could only talk for now. At this critical juncture of the change of imperial authority, the Grand Commander would never allow the 4 chiefs to fight among themselves. Therefore, Leng Shiqi didn't even bother to say a word and kept his mouth shut. Heavenly Lord He Yan looked around and waved his hand. "You're all dismissed. Do your own things. I'll take my leave." The 3 of them left at the same time. During this time, Steward Hai kept looking at Leng Shiqi with ill intentions. However, Leng Shiqi didn't respond at all. When they separated, Steward Hai's expression suddenly changed. He seemed to be thinking about something. He's getting more and more shrewd. Not bad, not bad. Lei Qingjuan's state funeral was scheduled for 5 days later. As one of the 4 stewards, Leng Shiqi naturally had to attend. When the emperor died, the entire Thunderfire dynasty had to mourn for him for 3 days. Only when he saw Lei Qingjun being buried in the imperial mausoleum with his own eyes did Leng Shiqi confirm that he was really dead. This emperor, who was described as mediocre, had produced a shocking spark at the end of his life. He didn't waste his time in this world. Lei Haoge's coronation ceremony was 10 days after the state funeral. Leng Shiqi also went to go through the motions. There weren't many people invited to the coronation ceremony. most of them were those who were in the main hall. The process was also relatively simple. After all, Lei Qingjun had just died and it wasn't appropriate to be too ostentatious. After the coronation ceremony ended, Lin Shiqi prepared to go back and cultivate in seclusion for a while. In any case, he now had control over the 4 major states and counties. It would be difficult for him to fight for supervisory authority in a short period of time. Moreover, he still had a large number of techniques and spiritual techniques to comprehend. He also planned to break through to the unity of heaven and man realm as soon as possible. Therefore, he could finally cultivate in seclusion peacefully. However, Lei Haoge's personal eunuch, Eunuch He, stopped him. "Steward Lu, please wait. His Highness the Crown Prince has something to discuss with you." Lin Shiqi paused. His mind was spinning rapidly. He had worked together with Lei Haoge in Shantai County before. However, Lei Haoge's attitude back then wasn't very good. Could it be that Lei Haoge was preparing to settle the score now? Lin Shiqi sneered in his heart. If that wasn't the case, then so be it. However, if Lei Haoge really dared to anger him, he had more than 10 ways to kill Lei Haoge. "Eunuch He, please lead the way." He and Eunuch He walked to a side hall. Lei Haoge was leaning on a golden-scaled throne. When he saw Lin Shiqi, he immediately said, "Lord Lu, you're here. I've been waiting for a long time." Lei Haoge's tone was full of arrogance. In Lin Shiqi's eyes, he felt like a nouveau riche. He said calmly, "What is it, Your Highness the Crown Prince? Just say it. How dare you? How dare you be so rude to His Highness the Crown Prince?" The eunuch beside Lei Haoge immediately shouted. "Lord Lu is my esteemed guest. Back in Shantai County, he helped me a lot. I'll let him off the hook," Lei Haoge said unhappily to the eunuch. However, there wasn't a trace of dissatisfaction in his words. Instead, he mentioned what happened in Shantai County. Lin Shiqi only felt a little amused. Lei Haoge had just become the crown prince and he was already so arrogant. If he were to become the crown prince, he would probably be so arrogant. "If Your Highness the Crown Prince doesn't have anything else to say, I'll take my leave." Lin Shiqi pretended to leave. Lei Haoge stood up. His expression darkened. "Lu Xingji, I'm already the Crown Prince. Are you still looking down on me? I'll be honest with you. Today, I'll give you a chance to surrender. As long as you swear to be loyal to me forever, everything in the past can be written off. After I become the Crown Prince, the position of Dark Thunder Guard Commander will be yours sooner or later." Lin Shiqi understood that Lei Haoge wanted to rope him in and cultivate his own team. However, he pretended to be confused. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, what are you talking about? I'm naturally loyal to the Thunderblaze dynasty." Lei Haoge sneered. "Don't play dumb with me. If you don't obey me today, don't blame me for being rude. Come out." Immediately, 3 people walked out from the back of the side hall and surrounded Lin Shiqi. They were all experts in the unity of heaven and man realm. Chapter 7:15. As the Crown Prince, Lei Haoge naturally had some experts under him. The 3 of them formed a triangle around Lin Shiqi. "What is the meaning of this, Your Highness?" Lin Shiqi's expression also darkened. In fact, there was already a faint killing intent in his heart. "Lu Xingji, if you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, then don't blame me. Now, this consort will ask you one last time, are you going to pledge allegiance to this consort or not?" Lei Haoge finally revealed his true intentions and roared fiercely. However, the more he acted like this, the more disappointed Lin Shiqi was in him. Perhaps Lei Haoge had been suppressed for too long, and suddenly a throne fell from the sky, causing some mental problems. At the same time, Lin Shiqi became more confident because he could see that Lei Haoge needed his support and strength. The Dark Thunder Guards were in charge of the world's intelligence. As the Crown Prince, Lei Haoge naturally couldn't take over the Dark Thunder Guards, so he needed the Dark Thunder Guards' intelligence to help him do things. Among the Dark Thunder Guards, Heavenly Venerable He Yen wouldn't pay attention to him, and it would be difficult for the other 3 directors to submit to him. Director Hai's seniority was too high. His prestige in the Dark Thunder Guards was only second to the Grand Commander. Moreover, he was already old. How many years could he be one of the 4 directors? He wouldn't stand in line. Shintu Zhen had a strong military background. Lei Haoge didn't have any military power in his hands, so it was impossible for him to order Shintu Zhen around. As for eunuch Gao, he was the previous emperor's personal attendant. He had followed the previous emperor for decades, and now his status was even higher. Even Lei Haoge, the crown prince, couldn't move him. Therefore, among the Dark Thunder Guards, only Ling Shiqi was the most suitable. As one of the 4 directors, his cultivation and power weren't high, so he was the most worthy person to be roped in. In fact, if Lei Haoge was polite and offered some practical benefits, Ling Shiqi might consider it. However, Lei Haoge was about to make a move, so it was impossible. Lei Haoge, you really can't change your nature. Even if you become the crown prince or even the emperor, you're still trash. Ling Shiqi couldn't be bothered to feign civility. You. Lei Haoge was stunned at first, then immediately flew into a rage. Lu Xingji, how dare you? Men, seize him. The 3 Unity of Heaven Realm cultivators moved their spirit power, and waves of powerful spirit pressure rushed over. However, Ling Shiqi's expression didn't change. He turned to Eunuch He and said, Eunuch He, you are a smart man. Lei Haoge has become the crown prince, but he hasn't made any progress. Instead, he is narrow-minded, arrogant, and unworthy of the position. Is this what you want to see? Also, do you really think that the 3 of them can keep me here? A spirit sword that emitted a faint rainbow-colored radiance suddenly appeared. The sword did not move, but that terrifying sword intent filled the entire side hall. The sharp sword chi instantly caused the 3 Unity of Heaven Realm experts to retreat. 8. Level 8 Earth Soldier. One of them shouted in shock. How is this possible? That is the treasure of the Thousand Illusion Sword sect, the Thousand Illusion Sword. Seeing that the situation was not good, Eunuch He walked to Lei Haoge and said, Your Highness, Lu Xingji's strength is very strong, and he has the Thousand Illusion Sword. I'm afraid that the 3 of them really can't take him down. Your Highness, don't be impulsive. Think about it. Last time when he was in Shantai County, he was only at the late stage of the spiritual aperture realm, and he was just a supervisor. Now he is at the late stage of the gang spirit realm, and he is one of the 4 directors of the Dark Thunder Guards. His terrifying growth speed is too amazing. We'd better rope him in rather than make him an enemy. And we also need his strength to make your highness sit firmly on the throne of the crown prince, so that you can make some achievements within a year. When your highness ascends the throne in the future, you can do whatever you want with him. He secretly transmitted the last sentence and didn't say it out loud. It was also the last sentence that finally calmed Lei Haoge down. Lu Xingji, I won't force you. Go back and think about it. I'm waiting for your answer. After saying that, Lei Haoge directly flicked his sleeves and left. Eunuch He secretly sighed. The current Lei Haoge was indeed very different from before, but as a servant, he could only persuade him a little. He waved his hand to let the 3 masters leave, and turned to Ling Shiqi and said, Lord Lu, His Highness is young and impetuous after all. Please don't take it to heart. Lord Lu, you can also think about what His Highness said. His Highness will never treat you badly. Ling Shiqi didn't believe it. He said a few perfunctory words and turned to leave. After returning to Xingji Pavilion, he arranged all kinds of things and prepared for seclusion. As for the matter that Lei Haoge asked him to think about, he didn't take it to heart. Among the various forces controlled by the Thunderflame dynasty, there were 3 that were outside the imperial power. The first was the Imperial Hall of Worship, where there were countless experts. These people had always been elusive. As long as something extremely important didn't happen in the Thunderflame dynasty, they wouldn't show up. Naturally, the imperial power couldn't control them. In addition, there were the Dark Thunder Guards and the Discipline Commission. These two forces were directly under the emperor. However, the Thunder Flame dynasty didn't have an emperor now, so they were also in a situation where no one could control them. Therefore, Leng Shiqi concluded that Lei Haoge couldn't reach the Dark Thunder Guards, so he prepared to ignore him and go into seclusion. However, when he was about to enter the secret chamber, two people found him. They were Feng Shamo and Silwan, who hadn't shown up for a long time. After returning from the Western Wilderness Prefecture, they also went into seclusion. Now, Feng Shamo's cultivation was the same as Leng Shiqi's, at the 8th level of Gang Spirit Realm. And Silwan also broke through to Gang Spirit Realm. They also knew about Leng Shiqi's recent achievements. Feng Shamo's eyes flashed with undisguised dissatisfaction and strong fighting spirit. He said, "I heard that you killed 1,000 Illusion Sword Master. Senior brother Feng, you must be joking. It's just luck." Silwan didn't want to complicate things, so she continued, "Your speed of improvement is incredible. No wonder Master and the others value you so much. You didn't disappoint them. Since you are now one of the 4 directors and have enough strength, we plan to go back to the Blood-Robed Pavilion." Leng Shiqi also felt that they should go. After all, their identities were still not perfect. Going back to the Blood-Robed Pavilion would save them from being exposed. "Okay, I'll arrange it for you. The next time we meet, I'll definitely beat you." Feng Shamo left these words before leaving. Looking at Feng Shamo's back, Leng Shiqi suddenly thought that Feng Shamo might be a good choice to recruit into the underworld. With Feng Shamo's talent, it wasn't a big problem to obtain the inheritance of the 10 kings of hell. But the key was that Feng Shamo's identity was too sensitive, and he was arrogant and ambitious. Unless he could guarantee that Feng Shamo wouldn't reveal the underworld, he still had to consider carefully. Keeping this matter in mind, Leng Shiqi announced to the outside world that he would completely enter seclusion. Unless there was something urgent, no one was to disturb him. Chapter 716. Time flew by, and soon half a year had passed. On this day, the aura in Leng Shiqi's secret room was surging. The aura was visible to the naked eye under the blessing of the Yin and Yang spirit gathering formation with thousands of mid-grade spirit stones. Not only the aura, but also all kinds of spiritual power between heaven and earth were gathering madly. The secret room was like a black hole, constantly devouring all the spiritual power. In the center of the formation, Leng Shiqi sat cross-legged, and there was a flickering light in his dantian. What Leng Shiqi was doing now was to break through the realm of oneness of heaven and men. The realm of oneness of heaven and men was the last level of the 4 realms of heaven and men. Naturally, it was not so easy to break through. Spirit cultivators of Gang Spirit Realm combined external forces with their own spiritual power and stole a trace of spiritual power between heaven and earth to condense Gang Spirit. At the same time, the spiritual power in their body also solidified into a spirit crystal. In the process from the 1st level of Gang Spirit Realm to the 9th level, the spirit crystal would become larger and more solid. And the more powerful the cultivation method was, the more solid the spirit crystal would be. Leng Shiqi was like this. His spirit crystal was at least several times more than that of ordinary Gang Spirit Realm cultivators. If one wanted to break through the realm of Gang Spirit Realm to oneness of heaven and men, one had to do an extremely difficult thing, that was to break one's own spirit crystal. Yes, a spirit cultivator finally condensed the spirit crystal, but in the end, he had to break it. Because the realm of oneness of heaven and men was not only cultivating one's own spiritual power, but also communicating with the spiritual power of various elements in this world. Using the spiritual power of heaven and earth to replace one's own spiritual power was called oneness of heaven and men. As the essence of spiritual power of spirit cultivators, the spirit crystal had to be broken to achieve oneness of heaven and men if one wanted to cleanse the mortal body. However, it was easier said than done to break the spirit crystal. It was certainly not possible to rely on one's own strength, but if one asked for help, one's cultivation would be directly destroyed, which would not work either. The only way was to communicate with and mobilize the spiritual power of heaven and earth to break the spirit crystal. Unfortunately, how could the spiritual power of heaven and earth be mobilized at will? Therefore, at this point, comprehension was particularly important, even more important than the talent of cultivating spiritual power. Generally speaking, the geniuses in those sects were mainly talented in cultivation. Their cultivation methods were twice the result with half the effort. Perhaps it would only take a few years to achieve what others had achieved in more than 10 years. But after reaching the peak of Gang's spirit realm, the advantage in this respect would become smaller and smaller. Spiritual power could be replaced by many foreign objects. For example, Leng Shiqi had reached the peak of Gang's spirit realm by constantly swallowing Tian Gang elixirs and refining all the Millennium Black Tortoise saliva in the past 6 months. However, comprehension wasn't something that could be provided by external objects. You were born with how much you had, and it couldn't be changed. Now that it was time for comprehension, many of the so-called geniuses were confused. There were even many people who knew the method to break through and had already suppressed their own cultivation to prevent their spirit crystals from being too condensed and hard to break through. But even so, this barrier still blocked more than 80% of spirit cultivators in Gang's spirit realm forever. This was also the reason why there were so few people at the Unity of Heaven realm. Leng Shiqi thought that his comprehension was very good. Although it was not as abnormal as Master Tudong, it was one of the best among the people he knew. This was not the most important thing. The important thing was that he had inadvertently touched a trace of the power of the law of heaven and earth before, which was far above the spiritual power of heaven and earth and the original power of heaven and earth. No matter how strong his spirit crystal was, he was not afraid. Because of this, Lin Yuanliang and the old man said that there was no pressure for Leng Shiqi to break through the unity of heaven and man realm. In fact, it was true. At this moment, the spiritual power in Leng Shiqi's body had reached a state of complete saturation. He was preparing to break the spirit crystal first, and then absorb the spiritual power of heaven and earth to transform into his own power. With a thought, a white tiger's shadow flashed behind him, and then turned into a breeze and disappeared into his dantian. Immediately, the breeze turned into several wind blades and instantly cut through his spirit crystal. Immediately after, several clear cracks appeared on his spirit crystal. As more and more cracks appeared, the spirit crystal suddenly shattered into countless fine powder. Leng Shiqi's face immediately turned pale. This was the most dangerous time to break through the unity of heaven and man realm. If he did not take advantage of this time to draw the spiritual power of heaven and earth into his body, his cultivation would be completely destroyed. Leng Shiqi patted his forehead, and a green mini Leng Shiqi came out. This was his primordial spirit. His primordial spirit left his body, and everywhere he saw, there were countless specks of light of different colors. The foundation of the unity of heaven and man realm would be determined at this moment. The more types and quantities of spiritual power of heaven and earth you could communicate with, the stronger your strength would be. The primordial spirit made a seal, and Leng Shiqi's whole body was shining with starlight. Star Atlas covered heaven and earth. Heavenly Cosmic Star Gang. In this mysterious starry universe, stars of different colors appeared again, and these stars all had a strong suction force, like a black hole, crazily absorbing all the spiritual power of heaven and earth. In the imperial capital, the unity of heaven and man realm suddenly looked at the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards in surprise. On the surface, there was nothing, but they could clearly feel that the spiritual power of heaven and earth here was raging. Many of them thought that there were masters fighting in the Dark Thunder Guards. There were also many masters of the unity of heaven and man realm in the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guards. They all ran to the Xingji Pavilion and raised their eyes. Occasionally, there was a trace of surprise in their eyes. This level of spiritual power of heaven and earth could not be attracted by anyone among them. It was clear that they had reached the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm. If they remembered correctly, there were only Yan Ming and Deng Xinlei in the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm in the Xingji Pavilion, but both of them were in the Pinghui Prefecture. Did someone break through the middle stage of the unity of heaven and man realm from the early stage? They never thought that it was Leng Shiqi who broke through. There was a huge barrier between the Gang spirit realm and the unity of heaven and man realm. It was unknown how many geniuses could not step through this barrier in their lives. In their impression, Lin Shiqi's cultivation made rapid progress. Even if he broke through the unity of heaven and man realm, it would be at least a few years later. In the secret chamber, Lin Shiqi's spirit returned to his body, and then his body glowed with dazzling light. All kinds of lights were intertwined, and the 9 colors were blurred and dazzling. At the same time, in his star sea, a huge level 5 star gradually formed, and all the spiritual power in his body slowly transformed into the spiritual power of heaven and earth elements. Strangely, the star marks, black marks, and golden dragon patterns on his spiritual crystal suddenly appeared again. Under the purification of the spiritual power of heaven and earth elements, they were connected and integrated with each other. In the end, they formed a black dragon pattern. There were a few star marks flashing on the dragon pattern, which looked mysterious. The black dragon star pattern then flew to Lin Shiqi's spiritual star sea like a dragon in the 9th heaven, and then sank into his spirit. Lin Shiqi's spirit immediately underwent earth-shaking changes. His body expanded rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, he became the size of a 7 or 8-year-old child. The black dragon star pattern appeared on the forehead of the spirit. In an instant, the eyes of the spirit turned into a star eye and a golden eye, and a few black lines appeared in the corners of the eyes. This was no longer the spirit, but the divine soul that only the spirit caster of the Tianyuan realm could have. This was the divine soul that was born when the spirit cultivator merged his spiritual power with the power of heaven and earth. There was the will of heaven and earth in the spiritual power. Even if the physical body was destroyed, the spirit cultivator could survive alone by relying on the divine soul, and his strength would not be weakened too much. Lin Shiqi was able to condense a divine soul when he broke through to the unity of heaven and man realm, which he never expected. When Lin Shiqi's divine soul and spiritual energy reached a delicate balance, a terrifying spiritual pressure erupted from Lin Shiqi's body. The array in the secret room was instantly activated, but more than half of it was still destroyed. Lin Shiqi stood up and clenched his fist, and the spiritual power of heaven and earth within a radius of 10 li throbbed. Unity of Heaven and Man Realm. Chapter 717. Lin Shiqi had never felt so powerful before. He felt like he was wandering in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. As long as he wanted, he could mobilize all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within a radius of dozens of miles. And he could mobilize the spiritual energy of heaven and earth of any attribute. At this time, 2 7th-level spiritual techniques appeared in the heavenly cycle star technique at the same time. They were Star's Fall and Star God Armor. Because Lin Shiqi's breakthrough to the realm of oneness of heaven and men was too big a commotion, even the other 3 general managers were alarmed. Others might not be able to see it, but they could see that Lin Shiqi was breaking through. He actually broke through. The 3 of them were surprised and surprised. Lin Shiqi was too young. At his age, it was already a rare genius to have the cultivation of spirit aperture realm. But he was already in the realm of oneness of heaven and men. This was not the most terrifying thing, but the speed of his progress. 2 years ago, when Lin Shiqi entered the headquarters of the Dark Thunder Guard, he was only in the middle stage of spirit aperture realm. In just 2 years, he had cultivated to the realm of oneness of heaven and men. This was the most terrifying thing. In addition, Lin Shiqi's fighting power was also known to be abnormal. He killed a gang spirit realm expert in the middle stage of spirit aperture realm. Now that he was in the realm of oneness of heaven and men, how powerful would he be? Even Eunuch Gao and the other 2 general managers felt some pressure. Before, Lin Shiqi, as one of the 4 general managers, was criticized the most for his cultivation. Now that he had broken through to the realm of oneness of heaven and men, his strength was not much weaker than theirs. This also meant that Lin Shiqi was officially qualified to compete with them for power and profit. After Li Jueqing's death, they had divided a lot of power, which should have been inherited by Lin Shiqi. Based on their understanding of Lin Shiqi, he would definitely not be willing to control 4 states. Lin Shiqi naturally noticed a large number of masters gathered outside the secret room. He did not rush to study the spiritual techniques. Instead, he said, "Everyone, I was lucky to break through to the realm of oneness of heaven and men. I still need some time to consolidate. Forgive me for not being able to welcome you." What? Lu Xingji broke through to the realm of oneness of heaven and men. That's impossible. I remember that he had just reached the Gang spirit realm when he came back from Shantai County more than a year ago. How could he break through so quickly? His talent is monstrous. It's not just talent. If one wants to break through to the unity of heaven and man realm, the most important thing is comprehension ability. This is what a true genius is. It's hard to imagine what level he will reach in the future. Maybe in 20 or 30 years, there will be another Sky Origin stage cultivator in the Dark Thunder Guards. Everyone was shocked when they heard Ling Shiqi's words. They couldn't help but start discussing among themselves. In order to avoid being disturbed, Ling Shiqi released all 8 ghost slaves to guard around the secret room, and he himself had very important things to do. That was to completely obliterate the system's consciousness. This time, during the process of breaking through to the union of heaven and man realm, he was baptized by the heaven and earth elemental spiritual energy and unexpectedly condensed his divine soul. He took advantage of this opportunity to manipulate his divine soul to enter the depths of his soul again. Ling Shiqi was confident that he would be able to completely wipe out the system's consciousness this time. From then on, he would have no more worries. When he was immersed in the depths of his soul, he was a little surprised. Because this time, the system's consciousness was not in a state of sleep. Instead, it was looking at Ling Shiqi with its arms crossed, as if it had known that Ling Shiqi would come. Ling Shiqi's divine soul raised his hand and set up a layer of flame-bounded domain. Then he began to speak. "Are you waiting for me?" "Yes." This time, the system's consciousness seemed to be very awake. It was not as mechanical or crazy as the previous 2 times. But the more the system's consciousness behaved like this, the more vigilant Ling Shiqi became. "What are you worried about? Are you afraid that I have some tricks up my sleeve?" The system's consciousness said with a smile, "Don't think too much. I'm no match for you. Isn't the purpose of your coming here to kill me? Congratulations, you're about to succeed." Ling Shiqi clenched his fist, and the shadow of the blood-soaked demon sword appeared. With his current strength, a short-lived divine epiphany was enough to kill the system's consciousness. He did not want to listen to the system's nonsense. It was a scourge, an invisible time bomb. No one knew when it would explode, so it had to be eliminated. However, just as he was about to strike, the system's consciousness said, "You did very well, much better than I did back then. You didn't rely on the system too much after you got it, so I didn't recover much of my strength. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been defeated so thoroughly. By the way, should I call you Ling Shiqi, Lu Xingji, or my next host?" Ling Shiqi's sword paused. What did the system's consciousness mean? "That's right. In fact, I'm not the system's consciousness that you think I am. I'm the previous host of this system, so I can be considered your senior." Hearing this, Ling Shiqi's eyes widened. He had never thought of this situation. If the system's consciousness was not lying, then why did he become an extremely weak consciousness? Ling Shiqi knew how powerful the system was. He also relied on the system to achieve what he had today, so the previous host would not be too bad. How could he end up like this? A dying man speaks the truth. "There are some things that I can tell you," the system's consciousness said solemnly. "When I first got the system, I rose rapidly like you, but I never thought about the system's shortcomings. I always used the system to its fullest. When I reached the peak of that world, the system finally showed its fangs. The system was actually a vampire. It was sent to various small worlds to find suitable hosts, then quickly cultivated the host to become the strongest in the world. Then, it would devour the host, and in turn, devour the entire world. And we are just the system's tools and nourishment." Ling Shiqi frowned. What the system's consciousness said was beyond his understanding, but it also confirmed that his first reaction when he got the system was to be vigilant. There was no such thing as a free lunch. This reminded him of when he met Lin Ying in Shi City. He was possessed by an evil spirit and thought that he had obtained a great opportunity. Little did he know that if Lin Shiqi had not intervened, Lin Ying would have ended up as food for the evil spirit statue. In this way, Lin Shiqi and Lin Ying were essentially the same. Of course, this was based on the premise that the system's consciousness was not lying. The system's consciousness continued, "I know you don't believe me. I just want to tell you a piece of good news and a piece of bad news. The good news is that you did not rely too much on the system. You relied on your own abilities to come into contact with the laws of heaven and earth in this world. The bad news is that you think you're smart. After you found me and killed me for the first time, you obtained a portion of the system's authority, right? But other than that, you should have noticed that every time you exchange system coins, a wave of energy will enter your body. Is that right?" Lin Shiqi's heart skipped a beat. The system's consciousness was right. He had wanted to explore it in the past, but that wave of energy never appeared again after it entered his body. He had no idea where to start. Actually, that's the nourishment that the system needs. Now that you've obtained a portion of that energy, guess what will happen? The system's consciousness sneered. Chapter 718. Lin Shiqi's eyes flashed. He couldn't guess what the result would be, but it couldn't be good. The system's consciousness pointed at itself and said, "Look at me now. I only realized the system's goal at the end and did something similar to you, which was to kill the system. I succeeded, but I also failed. I'm different from you. I used the system too much, and in the end, I tried my best to kill the system, and I became the system's person with the highest authority. But there was a problem, and that was that the power that should have been given to the system was transferred to me. At that time, I was already seriously injured and couldn't bear that strange power at all. Since then, I was assimilated by the system, and finally became what I am now. That is the system's consciousness you speak of." Hearing this, Lin Shiqi's breathing became heavy. According to this, after he killed the system's consciousness in front of him, he would also be irreversibly assimilated by the system, and in the end, he would become the next system's consciousness. "Now, do you still want to kill me?" The system's consciousness tilted its head and looked at Lin Shiqi with interest, as if everything was already under its control. However, it didn't wait for Lin Shiqi's answer. What it waited for was a shocking sword light, slashing the physical body and slashing the primordial spirit. Divine night blooming serious. The system's consciousness's expression instantly became flabbergasted. It said so much because it thought that it had grasped Lin Shiqi and was sure that Lin Shiqi wouldn't dare to kill it. However, Lin Shiqi dared to kill it. With the system's current strength, it couldn't resist at all. It hurriedly shouted, "Lin Shiqi, you're crazy. If you kill me, you'll be assimilated, and sooner or later you'll follow in my footsteps. Let me live, and I can tell you how to fight against the system. We can work together to completely kill the system, and you can even transcend this world. And I can also be reborn. This is a win-win situation. Why are you so stupid?" Lin Shiqi still didn't answer. There was only a terrifying coldness in his eyes. He could confirm that 80% of what the system consciousness said was true, but he would never allow another consciousness to be hidden in the depths of his soul. Especially when this consciousness was once a peak expert of another world. Who knew how many unimaginable secret techniques this kind of person had? He definitely couldn't be allowed to live. As for the method to deal with the system's consciousness had unintentionally revealed it earlier. That was to use the power of the laws of heaven and earth to stop the assimilation of the system. Lin Shiqi had already touched the edge of the laws of heaven and earth. In this aspect, he had far surpassed the spirit cultivators of the unity of heaven and man realm and the sky origin realm. This was also his biggest advantage against the system. As long as he could comprehend the true laws of heaven and earth as soon as possible and use the system as little as possible, he might be able to strip the system away. The system's consciousness was shattered by Lin Shiqi's slash, and a large amount of black and white light flowed out, which was absorbed by Lin Shiqi. His soul returned to his spiritual space, and the illusion character that had been floating there suddenly bloomed with a strong five-colored brilliance, and finally turned into lines of text. This was the complete ancient technique 5-God flowing light technique. All the words were imprinted into Ling Shiqi's soul. With his current realm, he could cultivate two 7th-level techniques 5-God throne and dream-colored glass. The 5-God throne could summon an ancient phantom that could intimidate all living things. It was equivalent to a trapping array. Not only could it trap people, it could also suppress a portion of the enemy's strength. The dream-colored glass was an illusion technique, and it was a large-area illusion technique. As long as Ling Shiqi was willing to use the full strength of his soul, he could cause an entire city of people to fall into the illusion technique and sleep forever in the dream realm. However, a blood imprint appeared on his soul. This was the blood oath that Ling Shiqi had made when he obtained this technique in the illusory spirit secret realm. He had to rebuild the divine illusion palace in his lifetime, or else the blood oath would break and his soul would be destroyed and he would not be able to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Ling Shiqi did not care too much about this blood oath. With his current strength and status, it was too easy to establish a force. He just needed to find an opportunity to build the divine illusion palace somewhere. Speaking of this, he immediately thought of Ozu. Since both of them had obtained the inheritance of the divine illusion palace, Ozu should have made a similar blood oath. If there was a chance in the future, he could give Ozu a large amount of resources to build another divine illusion palace. Then, Ling Shiqi simply studied the complete 5-God flowing light technique. This technique was an ancient technique. According to the current ranking, it should be between the 8th and 9th level. It was enough to cultivate all the way to the heavenly origin realm. What made Ling Shiqi feel a little strange was that in the past, whenever he broke through a large realm, the system would be upgraded. However, this time, there was no such notification. He immediately opened the system and looked at his information. Name, Ling Shiqi, Lu Xingji, Cultivation, Middle Stage of the Unity of Heaven Realm Status, Peak Bloodline, Dark Shadow Clan, Star Clan Management Authority, 100% System Energy, 17% Technique, Rank 8 Technique 10,000 Gu Spirit Devouring Technique Rank 8 Technique 16 Heaven Transformations Rank 8 Technique 1000 Illusion Sword Technique Ancient Technique 5 God Flowing Light Technique Supreme Technique Heavenly Cycle Star God Technique Special Technique Wild Demon Blood Beast Body Spiritual Technique, Rank 7 Spiritual Technique Purple Lightning Punishment All Rank 7 Spiritual Technique 5 God Throne Rank 7 Spiritual Technique Glazed Dream Rank 7 Spiritual Technique Falling Stars Rank 7 Spiritual Technique Star God Armor System Coins, 2790 He first saw that his cultivation was actually at the middle stage of the Unity of Heaven realm. This made him very surprised. He had clearly just broken through to the Unity of Heaven realm. How did he suddenly jump from the early stage to the middle stage? In fact, the realm of the Unity of Heaven realm was no longer divided into 9 levels like before. Instead, it was roughly divided into the early stage, the middle stage, the late stage, and the peak stage. There was no obvious barrier between these 4 small realms. It was mainly determined by the elemental spiritual energy of heaven and earth that you controlled. As long as you could mobilize enough spiritual energy of heaven and earth, there would naturally be a qualitative change and you would reach the next small realm. When Ling Shiqi broke through, he could already mobilize the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within a radius of dozens of miles. He had directly reached the middle stage of the Unity of Heaven realm. Of course, this could only be said to be a small surprise for Ling Shiqi. He was most concerned about the 2 information of the system's authority and the system's energy. Now that he had 100% of the system's authority, it meant that he could freely control this mysterious system. The system's energy had also increased to 17%. This progress was equivalent to the progress of his assimilation by the system. If it reached 100%, then he would become the next consciousness of the system. In other words, this was also Ling Shiqi's death sentence.